Hi, I'm Kyle.
And I'm Trevor, and welcome to Catching Up on Cinema. If you're not familiar with the program, Catching Up on Cinema is a podcast wherein Kyle and I take turns introducing one another to films, and in this way we help each other to catch up on our cinema. So it is August 2019, and for the first time ever, Kyle has handed me the reins for the programming selections this month. And I decided to go ahead and use this entire month to explore the world of anime. That would be Japanese animation. So I guess you can call this Anime August here at Catching Up on Cinema. A big reason why I decided I wanted to do this is because when I first met Kyle and we first started talking about movies and stuff, he expressed interest in anime, but he also expressed some trepidation about it. He sounded kind of lost about it. He didn't really know where to start. He didn't really know what was good and what had a good reputation. But he expressed some genuine interest. So I started trying to point him in the right direction. I recommended him a couple of the heavy hitters out there. Akira being the number one recommendation because I figured I should start him off the same way I started. And a lot of other people in my age range. But
Akira is the Citizen Kane of anime, I would say. Would you agree with that?
I'm not sure if that's a accurate assessment because I know Citizen Kane from top to bottom is a work of quality, in terms of script, in terms of cinematography, editing, everything about it, performances. It's a stellar film. Akira is intensely flawed from a storytelling standpoint.
Very true.
That'll Kyle, have you ever seen what the manga in print form looks like for Akira? Have you ever seen physical books of it?
No, I have not.
Okay. Well, it's about half the width of my desk in terms of page count.
Oh my gosh.
So they took most of that and tried to compress it into a 2-hour animated film. You can't do that. They gave it their best shot. They cut out huge chunks from the comic because obviously you have to. But the fact of the matter is what we got is essentially lights with sound.
Okay.
From an animation and an audio standpoint, it's remarkable. It's still gorgeous to this very day. There are very few animated features that can stand up to its level of quality. But in terms of overall quality of production, it's got some issues.
Gotcha.
But here in the U.S. though, I feel like it was what was the line they used in The Shark Is Still Working? Kevin Smith in regards to Percy Rodriguez. It was the weed to the crack that was anime. It was the gateway drug for a lot of folks here in the West because in the late 80s especially, anime was basically violent cartoons. At least that was the perception of it. It was cartoons for adults, and nothing quite measured up to that in that category.
That's the only reason that sparked my interest in it because all I knew of anime was Dragon Ball Z and stuff like that. And then somebody mentioned oh no, dude, they've got porn and they have bloody, gruesome violence in it. I'm like, oh, I did not know that. I thought it was all just cartoons. Interesting. Hook me up with some of that anime. I want to see. But because of the violence. Because of the violence.
Yeah. Backpedal a bit. So it goes without saying that I think the second film that I had you watch was Ninja Scroll.
Yeah.
Because Ninja Scroll's awesome.
It's awesome. I really enjoy Ninja Scroll.
Truly awesome. But yeah, for this month, I'm treating the programming as kind of an introduction to anime. So I've taken special care to make selections, not really based on my personal taste. I'm not just going to be jerking myself off and making you watch all the stuff I like.
I don't want to watch you jerk off. That's good.
Yeah, nobody does. I know I have a webcam going, but it's not for that purpose, I swear.
If anybody cut you jerking off, it was an accident.
Exactly. Oh shit, I left it plugged in. God damn it, Kyle.
Well, while it's plugged in.
But yeah, the point this month is I'm basically trying to give Kyle a very good introduction to the medium. So I've taken very special care to pick films with very good reputations, but more importantly, films from a variety of directors with very different styles. So I'm not feeding you the same shit every week over and over and over again. I'm trying to give you something different and give you a very comprehensive overview of, I guess, anime through the 90s and early 2000s, because that's mostly where my background with it stems from. I kind of broke up with anime at some point in the mid 2000s. I just got I became super saturated with it to the point that
you had a turning point. Did you reach that turning point where you're like, I can either be an otaku or I can be a functioning member of society? And you're like, you know what? I like having sex with girls. I'm going to go with functioning member of society.
A little bit. I mean, that's one of my things as a person, is that I don't have it in me to go 100% all in on almost anything I do. And I have friends that I guess do qualify as otaku. They definitely fit the profile, at least from an aesthetic standpoint. But yeah, I don't have that in me. And same with superhero comics. Around the time the Marvel movies really, really, really started to take off was around the time I divorced myself from comics. Just, I don't know. It's I consumed enough of this, and now I think I'm at a point where it's I think I'd like to give back a little something, which is part of why I'm doing this podcast with you, is it's my way of giving a little something back to the medium that I love. But yeah, the very first movie, well, it's not even a movie. It's actually a type of product that is in fact unique to anime. It's called an OVA, original video animation. Basically, it's a direct-to-video animation. It's the equivalent of those DC Warner Brothers animated movies you see.
Oh yes, yeah. Those are not.
It's the equivalent of that, except the major difference is Japanese ones tend to have unusual run times, 45 minutes or so.
Because they know how to keep it concise. Unlike Americans are we gotta have it 2.5 hours for what the fuck ever reason.
Yeah, they definitely gun for feature length all the time with American animations, but OVAs typically are 45 minutes or 38 minutes, some oblong number that you can get away with that because you're not screening it on television, so you don't have to worry about commercial breaks and things like that. So it doesn't have to be the standard 26 minutes or 1 hour block of time. And personally, I think most of my favorite Japanese animations are OVAs. It's a lovely format because it's removed from traditional censorship and stuff. So they tend to be able to get away with a lot more crazy shit. And like you said, they tend to be more concise. With a 38 or a 45 minute runtime, you get better animation quality in a shorter amount of time. So the pace tends to be very, very efficient.
We're also hand drawing. We're hand drawing all this stuff too, correct?
Yes. Yeah. In this era, absolutely.
Yeah. Keep it concise. We can't do 2 hours. Fuck, that's a lot of drawing we have to do.
Well, and also remember, these original video animations tended to be produced by smaller animation houses, or at least up and coming animation houses. So these were a lot of times passion projects on some level. So in terms of budget, they usually didn't have that much to work with. So this was labor of love type shit, where it's what ended up on the screen was the best we could fucking do, staying up all night for months on end or whatever. So yeah, the first episode of Anime August is devoted to a OVA called Otaku no Video, produced by the animation house Gainax, which is most famous for Evangelion, of course. That's one of those big name 90s anime, Kyle, that you've probably seen in some fashion, but you just kind of disregarded it.
Most likely.
It's impossible to completely avoid. You've touched it in some fashion. In fact, you've seen 1 Hour Photo, right?
Yes. Robin Williams?
The action figure that the boy buys from the equivalent of Walmart is from that anime. In fact, they even say the name in the movie. I mean, it's kind of funny. It's I wonder if anyone got paid.
No.
But yeah, Otaku no Video was directed by Takeshi Mori. It's not a household name in anime as far as I'm concerned. But the reason I picked this one isn't that it's like a shining example of like quality in the world of animation. It's just the subject matter I thought would be a good way to kick things off. So speaking of which, Kyle, like, I guess we should both give a little bit of a rundown in regards to our familiarity or our background with anime. So how about you start? Like, when you were a kid, were you familiar with this stuff? Was it something you dabbled in, or what?
Yeah, so at a very young age, I hated anime. I didn't like the animation personally. Pokemon. Is Pokemon considered anime?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Pokemon was huge. I didn't really get into Pokemon. My brother really got into Dragon Ball Z. I couldn't get into it. Basically, when they were really popular on television, I was getting out of cartoons, so I just never really got into it. And as I got older, I don't think I've watched a single. I think the only thing that I've probably seen was in Kill Bill when we're introduced to Lucy Liu's character. There's some animation, some Japanese animation there.
Yeah.
Other than that, the only until I watched Akira, I have not dabbled at all. And the reason why I mentioned earlier was I was curious about it is because I always just associated it with like just kid stuff, Dragon Ball Z. There was another one. There was another show. I can't think of it. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it was popular right around the time of Dragon Ball Z.
Is it Gundam or
Yeah,
Sailor Moon?
there we go. Yep, there you go.
Both of
them. So yeah, I just I didn't really care for the animation style personally. Growing up with American cartoons, and especially with Nickelodeon, like there were so many different kinds. Like I really liked like Ren and Stimpy. I was Real Monsters, Rugrats. They had a very particular style, and it was just the animation that I didn't care for in anime because across the board it's the same. I would say like it's anime. Like they all have it has a familiar look to it, whereas I was used to American cartoons that were very different in their animation style.
It's funny you mention that because I think that a lot of that had to do with timing, because Ren and Stimpy and Our Real Monsters, and to a lesser extent Rocko's Modern Life, those shows were 90s American cartoons, and they were very anarchic in their approach to the medium. Like some of the things they were doing, especially in like Ren and Stimpy, like some of the macro shots they would do were like very obviously like painted with a completely different style. Shows like SpongeBob a little later would incorporate like live action footage out of the blue. I think that just came from that era in our country in particular. Like that's just where we were in terms of art, where it was the 90s, man. Like everything was radical and, and grungy. It's like, let's tear down all the walls, and like there's no limits to what we can do in animation, so fuck it, let's just do whatever. As opposed to like obeying a character sheet and being like, no, Snow White has these proportions for every frame of every shot. It's like, no, fuck it. Like I'm gonna have Ren's face on the other side of the screen when he turns his head, just because fuck it.
Yeah, fuck it.
And like same with Ninja Turtles, it's like, shit, we forgot to record all of Leonardo's lines. Fuck it, let's just have the guy that does Donatello's voice speak for him today.
Big fan of Batman the Animated Series too. I would say that's probably the number one from I think that started in the late 80s maybe, but definitely 90s.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but I think the animation house that worked on that show did The Big O later on, a Japanese show that has a very similar look and feel to it. It has that same gothic like Art Deco style to it. But it's funny you cite like Pokemon and Dragon Ball, because those examples of anime are like Dragon Ball for sure is like the consummate like shonen story, like shonen meaning like young boys story, and that type of story is typified by being like serialized in such a way that like the story just gets stretched the fuck out, because typically it's told via like a weekly manga or something, and so the people who are cranking out these comics on the weekly, they're cranking out chapters like every fucking week, so they gotta hustle. So they basically have to pace things out so exactly one thing happens every episode. And if you translate that to television, it results in like really, really, really economical animation where it's like, okay, we have 26 minutes to fill. We need to have exactly one thing happen today, and then we just gotta get to the next one. So the pace of like both Pokemon and Dragon Ball, I'm sure, like, if the aesthetics didn't appeal to you, then the pace would just like be absolutely crushingly boring. But as we'll see, that's not all that anime is. And I mean, just to say a little something about my background with the medium, basically been exposed to it my whole life. Like my mom's side of the family in Hawaii, like I remember my cousin had, I think they showed Dragon Ball Z like subtitled just on like local television in Hawaii, because my cousin's like, he just had tapes of it, like a few years before we got it over here, like on the mainland. And I remember him like showing me and my brother some of them, and it was pretty fucking amazing. And then I saw I remember my other cousin on the other side of the family. I think my brother convinced him to rent Akira for us when I was like 5 or 6 or something. And holy shit, that made an impression. Like that will forever stick with me because I was far too young to be exposed to that. But holy shit, there's so many shots and sounds, and just the look and the feel of that will forever stick with me. It's a huge source of my own like creative inspiration. So even though it is an intensely flawed film, it's very, very important to me. And then yeah, like all through middle school and high school, I was into the Dragon Ball and the Gundam, like not just Gundam Wing, but like the entire fucking series. Like I got really into it, and especially in high school, I had a friend who was doing like the BitTorrent before the BitTorrent kind of stuff, like Emule and like Kazaa and shit. And he was essentially like one of the people we see in this Otaku no Video movie, where he had like a network of tapes and stuff flowing to him. And in fact, he was like subtitling his own stuff. And I hung out with him a lot, and we all just like hung out in the basement, played video games, and watched anime. So I guess you could say I touched this world in some fashion, even though I didn't open the door. I did like diddle the doorknob a little bit.
Diddle the
doorknob. But yeah, so I haven't really paid much attention to anime since like the mid 2000s though. So like if anyone out there is listening and is, you know, vibrating in their seat freaking out about gross inaccuracies about the things I'm talking about, feel free to drop a comment or something, or hit me up on the Twitter, because I'd love to hear about it. Love to hear how much of a lying sack of shit I am.
Only criticize Trevor. I don't care about your tears.
That being said, I guess we should get to it. So Otaku no Video, it's a 2-part OVA series. I think that the heading is like 1982 and 1985 or something. But I believe the animation begins in 1991, and we meet the guy who's going to become our hero. He's asleep at an office. I think, is it like Christmas Day or something?
It's like New Year's. It's definitely right around New Year's.
Yeah, and he's asleep at the office. It's empty, but he answers the phone, and it's just some super nerd calling and like asking when something's going to come out. And he hangs up the phone, and he's just like, "Oh my god, freaking otaku." And that's like our introduction to this term. Like, if you're not familiar with what otaku means, I forget if we've mentioned it already, but basically it means fanatic. It doesn't necessarily specifically pertain to anime and manga and stuff, or not even just nerdy things. It's just means that you're way too obsessed with one thing. So you could be really obsessed with football, you could be really obsessed with model trains, you could be really obsessed with the theater. If you're into it too much to the point that it like affects your social life, you could qualify as an otaku in some regard. And then we get an opening theme song, which was fucking amazing. Oh, yeah. I really enjoyed this. We get to hear it twice. What did you think of that, Kyle?
Oh, I wrote it down. 80s style opening credits. That's what I want our show opener to sound like.
Fuck yes.
To this point, we still don't have a thing, but it's hard. I don't know of anybody that does this kind of stuff.
Oh, I know. Like we got to find somebody, because I've been saying it for ages now. Like, if I was a filmmaker, I would find a way to have all of my movies have a self-titled theme song,
Oh yeah.
meaning a song that bears the same title as the movie.
Yeah.
So like Rock Lobster would have the song Rock Lobster, like Over the Top would have the song Over the Top by Sammy Hagar in it.
No Country for Old Men. That would definitely be a folk song.
Yeah, but it would see if I directed No Country for Old Men, I would find a way to slip in a song called No Country for Old Men in there.
You could probably do a better job than those Coen brothers on that No Country for Old Men.
Oh yeah, they're a couple of losers. They don't know how to tell stories.
A guy I work with asked me the other day, he's like, "You ever seen No Country for Old Men?" I'm like, "Okay, you want to talk No Country for Old Men? We can do that. You started it. We can definitely talk No Country for Old Men because that's my favorite movie villain of all time is Anton Chigurh."
I'm picturing you like pulling a rag out of your pants and just slapping it on the table. It's like, "Oh, you want to talk about No Country for Old Men? Let me hitch up my pants and I'll tell you about No Country for Old Men."
Sit down. Someone put on some coffee.
Yeah, put on a pot of coffee. We're talking No Country for Old Men.
Before we get going, I got to tell you something. I had Steph catch up on the movie Seven. She had never seen it, and it was super rainy where we were at. I'm like, you know what? It's a good time for Seven. I'm not allowed to pick movies for a while. She she thought it was good, but poor thing, she's just not a cinephile. So she likes, bright and poppy movies, happy movies, rom-coms, musicals, and stuff like that. And I gave her a dose of the fucking real world with some Seven. So, yeah. I'm
what did you do to that poor girl, Kyle?
She should have to see it. She should have to see it.
Oh, you broke her. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm curious, Kyle. When what's his face? Leland Orser. When he has his little situation with the strap on.
Yeah.
What was the reaction?
It took her. That's one of the first things I mentioned when I told somebody at work. I'm like, yeah. I was surprised at how long it took her to like put two and two together. Like, she's like, wait, what? Did she? She figured it out because she was just like, wait a second. She's like, oh my gosh. I'm like, yeah. Uh-huh. I'm like, this is the scariest movie I've ever seen, Steph, and it's not a horror movie. It's because this is one of the most fucked up movies of all time. Oh, well, I'm sorry. I was gonna say commercially successful fucked up movies of all time, because there are definitely some way more fucked up movies out there. Sloth, that she jumped. I was waiting for it too. I was just like, oh, she jumped. Like, you weren't expecting that, were you? Well, because this is actually I realized why I kind of brought this up was that you mentioned that when you were young, Akira made an impression on you because you're like, this is a movie I shouldn't have seen. I was too young. I'm like, the movies I watched when I was too young was Seven and like Terminator 2, Aliens. Like, these are movies that I watched very, very, very young, and so cartoons were kind of like, I don't need that. I'm on some other shit. Because I watched Seven before I was 10, basically.
Okay. Oh, funny story. I was at like a family dinner in Hawaii when I was really young, probably like 3 to 5 years old or something. And I'll never forget this. So all the kids were pushed upstairs. It's like, okay, like all the older folks, we're gonna be watching a movie. You get upstairs. You play with your Ninja Turtles or whatever. Yeah. And like me and some of the cousins or whatever, we ran down the stairs, and it was just at the right time when Ed 209 is blowing that guy away in RoboCop.
Oh gosh.
And we're just like, ah!
Man, yeah, I saw that when I was too young. My parents, I don't know what it was about censoring movies in the 90s. Like, my parents, they're like, if there was sexual content, they're like, we boys don't need to be watching this. But like, people getting blown away. We saw Saving Private Ryan in the theater, for Christ's sake. I mean,
oh fuck.
I mean, that's got 2 really, really, really heavy deaths in it. I mean, it's for somebody. I think I was like 10 when that came out. I'm pretty sure it came out in '99, didn't it?
98 maybe.
Oh fuck yeah! I mean, we saw that at the drive-in. I remember.
Yeah, first R-rated movie I saw in the theater was Starship Troopers, and yeah, that was like 97, 98, and yeah, that was That was an R-rated movie.
Yeah, co-ed showers. I love co-ed showers. That is an interesting concept. Co-ed, like, oh yeah, no, we don't have time to be going into separate locker rooms and stuff like that. Everybody just shower together.
No, that's what happens when you have a European director. He's like, fuck it, everybody's nude.
Everybody's nude. All right, everybody, YOLO. All right.
So,
you should explain
one
that.
thing that I'm not.
Oh, I was gonna say you should probably explain like how this is set up, because this is I was very confused going into this. I wasn't entirely sure what was going on at first.
Okay, so the gimmick with this OVA, with Otaku no Video, is basically we have a fairly linear and actually pretty simple story about a couple of young entrepreneurs wanting to get into the anime industry, and they go about it in a bit of a roundabout fashion, but they do it. The gimmick, though, is that it's semi like autobiographical, because the studio that produced this, I mentioned up top, was Gainax, and this is actually very similar to the story of how Gainax came together, except for the jilted lover thing. But basically, Gainax was a company that was a merging of two companies, one of which produced garage kits, like resin figures, and a small animation company. And they came together and they became like an animation powerhouse. In fact, some of the founders of Gainax are some of the heaviest of heavy hitters in the Japanese film industry right now. But along the way, we have these interludes that are framed as segments called Portrait of an Otaku. And basically, it's like live-action interviews with people that are, I guess, self-professed otaku in some regard, and usually they find a way to tie in the interview footage with the narrative that we've been following in animated form, and so it just goes along in this rhythm where we follow the story of our main character Kubo and his friend Tatanka, and then we cut to these scenes of interview footage of otaku, and it kind of paints a picture of this subculture and what these people are like as individuals. And then we have a lot of, I think, phony statistics that actually made me giggle a few times.
It felt like propaganda, honestly, because I'm like, these were not sponsored studies, and he's just like, everybody 100% claim that that 100% of the Americans claim that they were interested in anime. I'm just like, that's not a real statistic. Also, the subtitles for the American guy in this are not what he's saying. Like, they're definitely
you can hear
up.
him.
Yeah.
You can hear him a little bit, and he's not saying any of the things that are on the screen.
No.
Yeah. But yeah, we get our opening sequence. It's a magnificent song. You should look it up if you have any interest in like super bombastic like 80s anime openers. There's a few references here. There's a character, a lady with glasses that's dressed up as the character Lum from the famous anime Urusei Yatsura. It's not one that I'm familiar with, but it's a very iconic image. It's like a girl with horns wearing a cat skin bikini, basically. Very very popular image in anime in the 80s.
So we get a bunch of like definitions throughout, but we definitely get some here at the top, and I want to explain it to the listeners, and you correct me as I go, because I want to make sure that I understand this world as well. So if that makes any sense.
Cool.
Because if I don't jump in here, I'm not sure how much I'll be able to talk about. So what we have is before anime was big. Before I assume they started making actual movies. This was pretty much like a drawing club that were, I think, some universities, maybe high schools had them, and it seems like there were like groups of people that would go to, I believe it's Comiket. Is that how you say it?
Yeah,
Komiketo. Komiketo. It's basically where you and I could put together our own manga, our own anime comic, and we would go sell it. And I'm assuming you can do trades, you can make sales. Groups of mostly, I'd say 99.9% teenage boys. At least the photos that were shown in the movie were these young kids going to these comic markets, and
Yeah.
People will be dressed up. They introduced the idea of cosplay, and I can kind of see how this would be really informative at the time because now cosplay is huge with Comic Con, so everybody knows what cosplay is. But at the time, I'm sure nobody had any idea what it was. The couple of the characters in the story, the actual animated story that we're talking about, have their own comics that they're selling, and they dress up as their favorite characters. I'm not sure if they're dressing up as characters from their own comic or just other comics. Other
Just
comics.
ones that they like.
We have doujinshi. Is that how you say it? That's the actual comic, the actual magazines themselves. Is that how you pronounce it?
It's basically like a fan comic or an unofficial comic.
And within this subculture, we touch on like cosplayers, collectors. There was one guy, I think we would define as a role player, more or less. He was the elementary school teacher who would go and do gun stuff. That's what I'm assuming is role player.
Oh, I was just going to say it's called Airsoft, and I own some of those. I used them as movie props when I was a teenager, because that's
nice.
what you did. And I played once or twice. It's basically paintball, just with pellet guns.
They have a thing called garage kits, which are more or less painting and designing like small anime figurines. We'll touch on that later. And then we actually get a couple of instances of one was pornography straight up, and then there was another guy doing it's actually hentai pornography. Hentai, I learned, is just means it just describes behavior. It's not actually a type of drawing. It describes behavior, from what I understand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's basically like perverse or strange.
Yeah. And they're like, "Don't you think this is perverse or strange?" He's like, "I don't know." But yeah. So does that kind of give you Does that pretty much the overview of what what the movie's getting at?
Yeah, that covers most of it for the most part, I think.
Okay. So if you were able to follow along there, I have a tenuous grasp on what's happening.
Yeah, thank you for putting together the glossary, Kyle. It's
You're
a good thing to have up front.
Did everybody write those down? Because you will not be given definitions again.
Student mode. Engage.
Please hold all questions for after class. Thank you.
So our story begins in 1982, and a gal by the name of Yoko calls Kubo, who is the first person we saw in 1991. He is in bed. She invites him out to play tennis, and he's pretty excited, even though he just woke up. This is something that you can only express in animation, because in real life, when people first wake up, they look like shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they are not ready to play tennis. So he meets up with her, and this feels like a very I don't know, domestic anime from the 80s or 90s, where it's the soundtrack in particular. By the way, the music is done by a fellow by the name of Kohei Tanaka. Excellent composer, done many in anime. But yeah, the music is very bouncy and fun here. It's meant to be very lighthearted, I guess. And they're playing tennis. He's practicing with Yoko, and he beasts on her. He gets a smash opportunity, he takes it. And he just destroys her, and she chastises him. She's like, "You'll never get a lady because you're an ass. You don't know how to play a fair game. You had to smash on me, didn't you?" And of course he retorts with you just need more practice. And something worth noting here is that we do get a shot from behind, and we do get a hint of panties from her, because anime.
Because Japanese animation. Yes.
Because Japanese. It needs to be said, Gainax, as an animation studio, they have a reputation. The Gainax bounce, which I'm sure you know what that means in regards to
I saw that.
form.
I definitely saw that.
Is something they're known for. It's always put in a playful fashion. It's always extraneous. It's one of those things that they slip into their shots where it's somebody dumped a few extra hours, after hours more than likely, just to make that shot have that effect, because that wasn't necessary at all, but they decided to do it. And in fact, Gainax, as an animation studio, has that reputation, not just in regards to that, but they have a tendency to go the extra mile in some regards. In fact, Evangelion famously ran out of money when they got to the end of the series, to the point that the final episode basically has no animation budget. And they had to get very creative because they blew their wad like many episodes earlier and just had to get it done somehow. But yeah, some of their OVAs around this time, like, oof, some of the animation quality was outstanding, to the point that's like that could only have been achieved with technical expertise and effort. It had very little to do with money. It just had to do with people grinding and getting it done. Needs to be said, Otaku no Video is not a handsome animation. It appears to have been produced on the cheap. But yeah, this panty shot definitely feels like something they would put in there. Also, they have a reputation for being like, their staff is comprised of like fanboys, I guess. Like people who are just enthusiastic about the things that they like, which is a huge part of why the story of this OVA is the way it is, because it's their story. So it's not that they're trying to break new ground or like rewrite the whole fucking medium. It's more just, yeah, we like the things we like.
Yeah.
And then Kubo gets invited out for drinks, and it's some of the dialogue here is interesting because it's all just like flashes here and there of thoughts. It's not like an actual conversation. It's just like phrases tossed around, and you can tell that they're having like a very, very shallow, like very materialistic talk. Like one of the guys is drunk and kind of irritated and talking about cars and how like, oh, somebody got like a Beamer or something. It's like, Beamers aren't even cool anymore. We're all into Saabs.
Yeah, we're separating the superficial crowd with the nerds. Basically, he's hanging out with the more or less frat boys because he's in college. Like, yeah, these are the frat guys. I don't know if Japan has fraternities or an equivalent. I don't really know, but that's what I got. Was these are the frat boys.
I don't know that they have fraternities, but this is very much like the in crowd, I guess. Like these are the normal folks, and these are the normal conversations you're expected to have. So these are the socias, Kyle, and he's about to join up with the greasers. So Kubo ditches his college group. He says, I gotta practice for tennis club in the morning, so I'm not gonna hop to the next bar with y'all. And then they all file out of the elevator, only to be replaced by a bunch of people who, just by looking at them, and I'm sure just by smelling them, you can tell they are nerds. Ogre's radar would be just beep, 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 beep. So yeah, they enter the elevator, and the references to other anime are so numerous in this, and I can only recognize like a third of them, but they're so numerous that I'm not even going to try to draw attention to them.
They mentioned Kramer versus Kramer at one point. There's a Kramer versus Kramer revival going on. I'm like, why the fuck would you have a revival of that movie?
I don't know. Maybe it was popular in Japan or popular with the people who made this movie or something. I don't know.
I watched that when I was a kid. I watched some fucking boring-ass movies when I was a kid. My stepmom liked dramas, and Wuthering Heights is one
Steel
of the
Magnolias.
worst things. Ugh. Wuthering Heights is one of the worst things I've ever had to sit through.
I think you've mentioned that more than once. Maybe we need to do that.
Fuck you. You watch that shit and try to get an episode out of that. It is my favorite. It is my favorite Bond, Timothy Dalton. I mean, there's numerous film adaptations. Like there's PBS ones, BBC, fucking all kind. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of Wuthering Heights adaptations.
Okay, noted. So yeah, these nerds, they walk into the elevator and they're all swapping quotes about various anime. I caught some stuff about Captain Harlock and Gundam, which I've told you numerous times, even on the show, that like Gundam is a big fucking deal.
Yeah,
it's basically
it's
basically Japanese Star Wars. It's a big fucking deal. To this day, it's like the one anime that I will show up for. It's like the one. But yeah, it turns out one of the folks in this group is this stout fellow with glasses, and this isn't a mullet, but how would you describe his hair, Kyle?
It's honestly, it reminds me. He reminds me of Kevin Smith, and I think Kevin Smith had this haircut at one point. It was like,
I could see that.
it's
Yeah.
not committed to a mullet, but it's longer than it needs to be on the neck.
It's like Mark Borchardt if he combed it.
I was thinking, I don't know if you, Ike Barinholtz, and he's in Eastbound and Down, and it's kind of his haircut. It's not a mullet. It's like a Russian. It's almost like a Russian mullet is the best way to do it. It's not a whole mullet. It's just longer in the back than it needs to be, but not too long.
Okay. After we record, I'm gonna have to Google fake Wahlberg mullet and
There
see
you go.
if that gets it. But yeah, this fella with the indescribable mullet-esque haircut, his name is Tanaka, and he knows Kubo. Apparently,
Yeah.
they went to high school together or knew each other in high school, and he's really excited to see Kubo. And they talk a little bit, and
Kubo, I'm a nerd. Remember, I was a nerd, and you were a nerd for a minute. Do you want to come be a nerd with us or something? Yeah, that's the conversation.
well, that's what's kind of clever about this is that like one of the best things that it does is it neither like condemns nor like praises otaku culture 100%. It kind of plays both angles. And this first exchange between Kubo and Tanaka, like you can tell Kubo's happy to see him because he's brand new in college and it's a familiar face. But at the same time, when the short fat man starts going on and on about comics and anime, you can tell Kubo's like, it's like, yeah, I'm glad that's working out for you.
I'm
I
figuring
play tennis.
I was gonna say I'm figuring other stuff out right now. So
It's like, yeah, oh shit, I'm in an elevator. I got nowhere to go.
bone this college girl, dude. Like,
Not just a college girl, a college girl who's a year ahead.
oh yeah, I did notice that she's a sophomore. Yeah.
Oh,
Come up.
I mean, Mr. Kubo is quite smooth. He's also a little bit tall for a Japanese man, so he's got points. And he's on the tennis team. Quite the stud.
Isn't Takihara? Isn't he pretty tall?
Kinda. By Japanese standards, yeah.
Okay.
He's not like super tall or anything, but yeah. Tadanobu Asano is his name. It makes me sad some of the American movies he does, but yeah, go for it.
Was it and I Saw the Devil? Is that where the brother? Oh no. You had me watch a few different. I can't remember if it's Old Boy or I Saw the Devil. There's a really tall fella in there who's a model basically. I want to say
both of those are Korean.
I can't think
Really
of which one it
tall.
is. He was tall. It was that. He's like super rich, and he's I guess he's been banging his sister the whole time.
That would be Old Boy.
Old Boy, okay.
That'd be Old Boy, and Koreans tend to be taller than most
Okay.
Asians. They've had beef longer than the rest of us. It's science.
It's science.
But yeah, it's science. So this, I believe, is where we get our first interlude. And we get a whole bunch of these really strange title cards that precede all of these segments. And I made sure to write all of them down just because I wanted to try to make sense of them. I don't think I can. But they're just dates and things that happened on those dates. And
Yeah,
I don't know if any of it connects. Some of it's bullshit because some of it happens in the future. But yeah, I wrote them all down, and I'll say them on the air just to maybe somebody out there can make sense of it. But the first one is March 18th, 1982, the debut of Magical Minky Momo. That is an anime. It's apparently a very, very, very long-lived one. Somebody does mention it by name in the animation, and being as this is supposed to take place in a semi-real Japan in the 80s, I guess that makes sense. It's basically just an indication of place and time. So our first portrait of an otaku, and I believe all these names are falsified or altered to protect the person, is with Tamatani Junichi, born in 1963. He is a salesman for a machine tools company, and he has been an otaku for 13 years. So this fella, I believe we interview him in a restaurant or a cafe. The lighting and the texture of this scene is very dingy. Made me think of like Blade Runner or something.
I could smell it. I
And
could smell the inside of that restaurant.
yeah,
I know that
it's
smell.
yeah. He is smoking throughout the entire interview. So it is very much a coffee and cigarettes type situation in some sort of diner or something. The interview progresses, and basically they're asking him like, "What was your social life like back in like high school and college?" And he says that he was in a science fiction group and an anime group. He made dojinshi with his friends. They had plans to make a movie at some point. He does express some regrets about not making the movie because he sounded like he had some confidence about it. And in general, he just goes on and on and on about like writing dojinshi, drawing them, being proud of the fact that he sold like 150 to like 300 copies of each of these things. And then like his favorite thing to do was just like hang out with his friends. And he keeps using the term research in regards to all these clubs he was in. So like basically it just sounds like nerd debates, like just debating anime and manga and science fiction. And then he very casually mentions Lolita stuff, which is naughty naughty. And then he does mention seifuku a couple times, so like sailor school uniforms basically. So he is nostalgic about getting drunk and getting into arguments with his friends about sailor uniforms. And yeah, he at one point the interviewer asks him like, "Do you have any real friends?" And he takes the longest fucking pause. And he at first he refuses to answer, and he seems like he's kind of offended.
Yeah. There's a couple of dudes who are offended.
Oh yeah, there are a couple dudes who are straight up like they don't have the vocabulary to back it, I guess, but you can tell from their body language and the timing of their responses that's like they're not happy with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can tell that he I guess he's upset that he has moved past that point in his life because it was, I guess, like a magical time for him.
Yeah.
And you know, I think we can all relate to that on some level, where it's like we have that period of time where it's like, oh, you know, it's like I just do what I do and I don't have to worry about anything. And then we all grow up.
Yeah, and then you have to pay for health insurance, and then shit gets real.
Yeah. And then following each of these live action interviews, following each of these portrait of an otaku segments, we get some like statistics and graphs, and then some narration regarding said statistics. And I think this one is about like statistics of school clubs and like who participates in what clubs, and how like anime is like on an upward trend. And this is in like 1991. And the fun thing here is that the person narrating all this is what's his name? Akio Otsuka, I think, and he's one of the biggest voice actors in like all of anime history. So it made me smile to hear his voice because he has like the most beautiful delivery. But yeah, we cut from there to we're going to the park, and then we go to a cafe, and we get to meet Kubo's, I guess, his lady friend. Like, I never quite put together what their relationship was, but they had a thing going on.
Yeah, he's trying to close. He's trying to close here, and he's doing a good job, really. I mean, he's a freshman trying to close in on a sophomore.
Fuck yes.
Yeah, she's pretty hot. I mean, I get it.
Yeah. They're having a little talk at a cafe. And I noted that there's a Space Invaders arcade cabinet in the foreground while they're talking. And that made me smile because I know Space Invaders was a huge deal internationally, but especially in Japan. And he invites her to the May Festival. And we very quickly cut to that. That's the thing about this, is it moves very fucking fast.
Yeah.
Kubo is running a yakisoba stand at the festival, and he's bitching about the fact that his booth is in a shitty spot, so he's not getting any customers. At one point, he decides to he says fuck it, and I guess he abandons the booth or something and just takes a walk. And then he comes across the white base booth. White base being the like the hero spacecraft from Gundam. And it's funny. I love the timing on this because he like walks past it, and then Tanaka runs out at him from the white base booth, and he's dressed like Char from Gundam. And he's like, Kubo, Kubo, and Kubo like keeps walking for a little bit. Like it's like one of the situations where it's like, if I keep walking, maybe he'll give up. Maybe he won't come find me. Yes. But yeah, it turns out Tanaka and all his buddies, they're selling dojinshi at the festival. They're all doing cosplay and stuff. The gal from the opening sequence, same gal with the glasses, her name is Sato. She's dressed in her Urusei Yatsura Lum costume. And she very casually mentions that she sold all of her books. And the camera like does an up and down on her. It's like, I wonder why. Or I wonder how. Yeah. And then we get a funny moment where Sato basically almost looks directly into the camera and explains cosplay.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. I did get a kick out of that.
It's funny. Like, I got a laugh out of it, especially because it's now 2019 and people the world over are really into that now.
Oh, it's
so
huge.
It's like back then this kind of thing was necessary. But now it's like so extraneous to the point that's like, what are we doing? Like, is this a joke?
Yeah. So she kind of explains it, and then I think we turn to another dude. Do we not? We get we get the definition of cosplay. We know what cosplay is. They explain like the magazines are. They explain the market itself. But then we meet another guy in an office.
Oh, we cut to another interlude here. This would be another portrait of an otaku segment, and this is a gentleman. He's sitting behind a desk with a computer. He's in a full suit. He looks very well put together.
Does not fit that suit.
The heading.
He needs to get that shit tailored.
It was. I mean, maybe it was the style at the time. I don't know. It is very Talking Heads-esque.
Yeah.
But yeah, the heading before his interview is May 1st, 1982, British troops invade the Falkland Islands. For what purpose? I didn't bother looking it up, but it's apparently a thing that happened. Anyway, this guy's name is Ikuta Yudai.
I know why. I think I know why now, because this movie ends with the destruction, like post-apocalyptic, and I think it's like giving you cues as to where the actual narrative is going with the animation. I think that's what it has to do with.
Could be.
That's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll keep reading these things back, and you keep track of them, see if you can make sense of it, because I couldn't. So this fellow was born in 1969. He is a computer programmer. He has been otaku for 9 years. He attended Waseda, which is a big-time university. He knew people in media, and he looks at anime and such as a thing that he put behind him. He is questioned repeatedly about this, and every time he's very dismissive of it. He's like, oh, that was a thing that, that's for kids or whatever. And all he seems to want to do is talk about like his job. And what's funny though is over the course of this interview, he starts talking about audio tech.
Yeah.
And he's an audiophile. He's an audio otaku now. So I guess he diverted all that energy and pushed it towards audio equipment, because he's talking about like speakers and like transistors and stuff. And it's like, okay, you're a little bit into that. Same with computers. And then they ask him a couple other questions, and he throws a couple of choice quotes out there, one of which being, it's not like I'm ashamed of my past or anything. And then they pull a fast one on him, and they like pull out a photo of him cosplaying from his youth, and he like sits up straight and like almost like reaches across the desk and be like, "Where the fuck did you get?" Like,
well, you disrespected me, bro.
He starts. Yeah. And then he backpedals a little bit, and like the closing shot of his interview is he takes off his jacket and he like opens his desk drawer and he has a Char helmet from Gundam.
Yeah.
And he puts it on and then he quotes Char. He says, "One does not care to acknowledge the mistakes of one's youth." And then end interview. It's like, okay, so he's a closet otaku now.
Next shot, ogres hanging him upside down from a staircase.
Yeah, the office bully finds him. It's like, it's like, you've been here the whole time. And then yeah, we get some more bullshit statistics this time about cosplay and how like the frequency in which people do it, and like how I love the quote on this data table. It says, "How many cosplays have you perpetrated?" It's like, what? Perpetrated?
What? We get introduced to our other characters. So Kubo is I don't know how he meets up with, what's his name?
Tanaka.
Tanaka, like Banaka, but Tanaka. Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure how he bumps into him, or do they live in the same building? I'm not entirely sure what happens. Are they both at university?
I don't think they go to university together, but it's not really explained. He's just kind of like, yeah. He gets off the phone with his lady, who he may or may not be seeing, and then he ends up visiting Tanaka instead. It needs to be said that she does apologize to Kubo for not showing up at the festival. So that could explain why maybe he's a little bit hesitant to go all in on her, because she did kind of not show up at the fucking festival.
That's a red flag for you folks out there who are dating. If you get a no call, no show from a lady, that's a pretty much, she doesn't want to see you. For you otaku out there. So yeah, he ends up hanging out with his boy, and it looks like I thought he was drawing, but is he painting?
I think he's either painting a model or a animation cell or something.
And he's got a collection of manga in his apartment, and it's a big collection, and he's just like, oh, you think this is something? You got to come check out my friend's apartment. And you go to the apartment, and it's all those people from the elevator. And here's where we kind of get introduced to all the different factions of this subculture. So one guy, he's really into sci-fi and visual effects, who I was like, I think I'd like that guy. He's really chill, by the way. He's just like super fucking cool. One dude is one of those not cosplayer, role player, more or less. Go ahead.
Here, I'll give you the right terminology. I just remembered it. It's called MilSim, military simulation.
Okay.
Yeah.
MilSim. He's explaining. He's just like, you have to pick a character. Like he's like, you have to. He's saying that you have to pick your character and be that all the time. But what he's trying to explain to him is like, you need to engulf yourself into this subculture in order for you to be like a part of us, like to be a part of this. And they kind of give him like a crash course and everything. But what's the girl?
Sato, she is into Bishonen, which is basically translates literally to like pretty boy.
Oh.
So there's a subgenre of manga and anime that's devoted to pretty dudes.
Gotcha.
Stories about pretty dudes.
They said that, and I'm like, okay, yeah, she's into drinking and dudes. I'm like, why is she a part of this? But now that makes more sense. It's an actual animation. Okay.
Yeah.
The fanatic, I want to call him, is the MilSim. Is that what it is? MilSim?
Yeah, there's a MilSim guy, and then there's also a pro wrestling guy.
There we go.
He's the one with like the short hair, like the crop top kind of thing going.
Yeah. Which I was like, Trevor likes anime and pro wrestling. I'm like, is this a thing too? Like, do these two go together? I'm not sure. If they do. I did not know that. I was not aware of that.
No, one of the most famous animes, well, two of them, Tiger Mask and Kinnikuman, are both about pro wrestling.
Did not know that. So yeah, the visual effects guy gives him like a whole bunch of stuff. They're like, you gotta learn how to do this, and they're showing him how to paint. Like they have somebody who's animating, like actually drawing, and then somebody is actually painting them. They have a guy that works the night shift. They don't really say what his shtick is, like what he's into. They just say that he keeps weird hours, so he works the night shift of putting together all these comics. But yeah, he's getting quizzed and grilled about the different stuff. There was one that I knew the answer to, or one that I would have known the answer to, but I can't remember what the question was. It was kind of rapid fire.
Well, there were two of them that jumped out at me. One of which was about the Triffids from the American sci-fi film Day of the Triffids.
Nope.
And then there was a Star Trek question in there from
That's
the
what it was.
original Star Trek. Both of which I didn't know the answers to, but I recognized the names. So, Google is your friend.
Well, that's what threw me off. I'm like, this is about like with animation and stuff like that. What the fuck is he talking about Star Trek for? Like, he's got to know that shit too, because that's a whole other subculture. That can't be a part of. I'm like, that's a whole other thing. Not that there's anything wrong with that, dude. I'm trying to get through. I'm trying to get through the next generation. It is tough. Like the first season.
I love it.
The first season is difficult.
Well, the first season's rough. First season is rough.
I'm pushing. That, I'm trying to push through.
I started watching that like a couple years ago. I think I'm in season 6 now, and mind you, I started this a couple of years ago. So I've been taking my sweet time with it. But I've really, really enjoyed it. Like, I didn't watch it as a kid. I used to change the channel when it would come on, but the pace of it is so far removed from anything we have now. It's so laid back. I love it.
Jonathan Frakes in his prime, better looking than William Shatner. I'll go ahead and say it.
Dude, he's like super fucking tall, and like he's got that swagger.
Oh, he's a
like,
peach.
He's always super chill.
He's such a peach in this first season because he's clean shaven. I'm like, God damn. Frakes, I think, was supposed to be. He was supposed to. I feel like he was supposed to be the main captain, and then somebody's like, Patrick Stewart, and they're like, and he's just like, fuck. So I'm not the captain. They're like, no, you're co-captain. You're the executive officer, not the commanding officer.
No, you can't have that. You can't have that sexiness on camera like 90% of the time. Like, that's just too much, man. You'll hurt people.
Isn't Scott Bakula? Isn't he one of the dudes now, or in subsequent?
It was.
It's not Deep Space Nine. Is it Deep Space Nine? Is that the one with Jerry Ryan? I can't remember.
I think it was just called Enterprise. Star Trek Enterprise, maybe.
That's the one after Deep Space Nine.
It's after Voyager.
Which one was Jerry Ryan on?
Deep Space Nine.
Okay.
Or yeah, I think she was on Deep Space Nine. Either that or Voyager. See,
there's a Star Trek.
There's somebody freaking the fuck out right now.
Oh, I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, and one of the guys mentioned something. Now I understand the frustration because he said something completely wrong on there, and I'm like, oh my god, like I have no way to tell him how wrong he is about this. I'm like, this is.
Oh no.
I get it now. I get it. I'm like, oh, this is infuriating. I'm like, whoa.
What was it about?
I can't remember now, but I think even it would bother you. Like, I just can't. He drops like some kind of some knowledge about a movie or something like that, or it's just completely wrong. And I'm like, you're a film critic. You're a film critic, and you can't get this right. I'm like, oh gosh. So angry. I almost text you to be like, I need you to jump on Twitter and tell them that they said this wrong, because I'm not on Twitter. So it'll come to me later. I'll try to remember.
Okay, so we get another portrait of an otaku here. February 10th, 1983. 6 16-year-old boys commit repeated assaults on homeless persons in Yokohama, killed 3 and injuring 13. And then the otaku we get introduced to is Harold Shioda, born 1961, currently wandering the U.S., 15 years in otaku. And this guy was one of the more interesting interviews they had. This guy has something taped to his head. I'm not sure what it was because it was occluded by like one of those mosaic patterns, one of those digital mosaic patterns. Mm-hmm. And he has a lot of tapes. He lives in squalor. You can't navigate his living space because it's just piled from top to bottom with VHS tapes. Apparently, he collects idols, meaning ladies, basically. Like, do you know what an idol is in like Japanese terminology?
Trevor, I have no idea what that is.
Okay, basically, it's a young woman that is just. It's kind of like a famous for being famous kind of situation,
Okay. Like
but they actually
Elvira.
do, but kind of, but it's really a loose definition because oftentimes idols are singers, dancers, actors, bikini models, all wrapped into one.
Okay.
And
Fun.
basically that, yeah, they. I don't know how to explain it. It's hard.
Okay. Fun fact. Vampira actually sued Elvira for. Is that how you say your name, Elvira?
Yeah, yeah.
The lady. Yeah. She unsuccessfully sued her for stealing her shtick. Which I'm like, if you got a good lawyer around, good lawyer, how did you lose that? But I'm sorry. I just watched Ed Wood last night, so.
Oh, Vampira, the real Vampira, in interviews, she is amazing.
Really?
Like, she is a good interview. She casually mentions in the Ed Wood documentary I watched recently that Orson Welles gave her the clap. And her delivery is priceless because she's just like, oh, well, you probably don't want to know about that one time
Oh
when
my
Orson
God.
Welles gave me the clap. And it's like, oh, fuck.
Dude, I'm sorry.
More about that, please.
Sidetrack with Ed Wood real quick. Martin Landau, when he is playing Bela Lugosi, and there's that electrical equipment, and he's like, "I'm not getting near that goddamn thing." I don't know what. Martin
I'm
Landau's
not getting near that goddamn thing.
goddamn thing.
It burned me.
Oh man.
I love Karloff, sidekick. Fuck you!
It is a good fuck you. Yeah, I was.
Limey cocksucker!
Oh gosh. Bill Murray when he's getting ready to be baptized, he's like, "Do you accept Jesus Christ?" And he's like, "Sure." It's not even
Oh,
a
Bill
yes.
Murray has so many good moments in
He's
that.
so-
My favorite is at the party when he has the mariachi band with him.
Oh yeah.
And Tor Johnson's asking him about his sex change operation, like, how did it go? And he's like, it was terrible. He's like, but the emphasis he puts on his words is so beautiful because like he casually mentions that the guy he was with got murdered.
Oh.
He just casually mentions it. He's like, Todd was murdered, but then the next line is, our luggage was stolen. It's like you can tell he was more affected by that than the murder of his guy friend or whatever. But our luggage was stolen.
Priorities, man. Priorities.
Oh yeah, but yeah, this fellow with all the tapes. So he collects idols and animation and TV commercials, specifically rare commercials, and basically he's just trying to preserve media. And he's asked, does he actually watch any of these tapes? And he very quickly says, no, I just collect them. And he wants a perfect collection. He has a network throughout the country of people like-minded individuals who he trades tapes with. And he gets a phone call during the interview from somebody who I'm guessing has a tape that they want from him or something. It's kind of hazy, but this is where I started to have a revelation of sorts. Is I feel like anime and just fandoms in general, like otaku culture across the board, really spread like wildfire due to accessibility. Because from this interview and from other instances in this very animation, we see that like anime really started to grow and become like a mainstream thing worldwide when it became accessible in some fashion. And the first wave of it came in the form of VHS and beta, like just reproducible media basically, because before that we just had TV and movie theaters.
Well, he mentions that it's actually better, like, the guys that live in the rural areas, he's like, they actually get the better stuff because it's on air and it doesn't, like, they do more obscure stuff than they do in cities, which I thought was interesting. But yeah, I picked up on that.
Yeah, I mean, even the characters in this OVA, like Tanaka,
They
as
call
we'll
him
see
City
in
Boy.
just a minute here. Yeah, they call Kubo City Boy, but like Tanaka has a collection of VHS tapes. They actually asked Kubo like, "Do you remember this one TV show? It was like a science fiction or mystery TV show. Do you remember that?" And he's like, "Yeah, it was great." And then Tanaka very enthusiastically whips out a bunch of tapes and says, "Well, I have them." And
Oh,
that wasn't possible until that generation.
I am so sorry, Trevor. I completely forgot about the one anime that I watched when I was a kid, and my brother probably remembers this too. So, Samurai Pizza Cats.
Oh, fuck! Yeah,
Yeah.
I watched that too, man.
Every morning before
I was
school.
always very frustrated. I was always very frustrated because I never really got to finish it before school.
Yeah,
I always had to leave.
Yeah.
That and Secret Squirrel, which was not an anime, but
Actually, because of our time difference, you were 2 hours ahead. I think they played a couple of them, and we caught like the last 15 minutes, or at least the second half, because then, like we were like right in between, so we'd catch the end of Samurai Pizza Cats because it was really really early, and then The Mask would be on after that. I remember
fuck,
the Mask TV show was on.
yeah, I watched a little bit of that.
You're fine.
But yeah, Samurai Pizza Cats was good times. In fact, I think it's getting like a DVD or a Blu-ray re-release pretty soon here.
Oh.
I don't know that I would care to go back to that, but good memories though.
The name pretty much tells you what you want to do.
But yeah, we cut back to Kubo and Tanaka, and this is where the sequence I mentioned, where Tanaka is like showing off his tape collection, happens, and we get to see some really bombastic animation sequences, which it's basically mostly like mecha kind of stuff, so like jets and robots and missiles and stuff. And it's really really good animation. This footage is actually from the very first animations that Gainax ever produced. It was an opening video sequence, like the equivalent of like the opening ceremony for the Olympics, but for a convention. It was for a convention called Daikon, and it was for Daikon 3 and 4. I would like you to actually watch these because they're pretty fucking cool. And one of them has a ELO as the backing music, Electric Light Orchestra, which I happen to like. But basically, we get to see like it's a little cameo from like Gainax's earliest animation here, and we can see that Kubo's getting really into it. And then the sequence that you had mentioned where everybody's kind of quizzing him happens here. And so it's basically all of the nerds in the room throwing everything they've got at him. And I believe the sequence ends with Sato like kind of encouraging Kubo to continue drawing and painting because they're like practicing drawing and painting like animation cells. And she gets him a red shirt, which the character Kobura is a very prolific anime / manga character. She got him basically a cosplay outfit, and you can tell that he's like starting to get swept up in things. We get another interlude here. It's 1983, September 1st. Soviets shoot down a Korean plane. Okay, was not aware of that, but that's a thing that happened.
I think we're leading up to. I think we're leading up to the apocalypse that were not explained in the actual animation. I'm sticking with that.
Well, I'll go with that. I'll go with that for now.
Okay.
So we get another portrait of an otaku, Mamiya Kenji, born 1969, English teacher at a girls' school, 5 years in otaku. And this was the one that you had mentioned. He's the milsim guy, so he's smoking and playing airsoft. And we're interviewing him, and he's talking on and on about his gun. He mentions that it's been modified, which to me means that the motor has been upgraded to shoot harder, which I believe there are actually Japanese laws against like a certain number of feet per second for pellet guns, because otherwise it becomes like a dangerous projectile weapon. I think it's around like 300 feet per second is safe, and like over 400 is considered dangerous or something. I used to be kind of into this stuff. And then they ask him like, have you ever considered shooting small animals? And he does say that yeah, he has. But then they ask him what his feelings are on war and like hurting other people, and he very sheepishly says like, "Oh no, I don't approve of either of those things." But he does mention that he likes the beauty of the gun's functionality. He likes like a singularity of purpose, and he does mention that he likes that him being a person who is slight of stature and build has a fighting chance against anyone as long as they're both using guns. So he's got like maybe a little bit of a Napoleon complex. And then our data table for this sequence is there is no correlation between anime and guns. Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Then we get, I think Kubo goes to Komiketo this time, and he does in fact go through with the cosplay. And then we get to see him with his lady friend again. And do you remember this exchange?
Yeah, she's like, "You're getting fucking fat, and you look like a slob, and you're just fucking, are you just pulling all nighters again? You're fucking fat, dude. Ugh. So yeah, she's pretty much just it's not working for her anymore. He's gone from like pre-cheating Tiger Woods to DUI Tiger Woods at this point. Like he's not looking good.
Yeah, we get a nice little tilt down shot where she says he's fat, and then we tilt down to his waistline, and it is kind of soft. Yeah. You can tell he's a little.
They show his pile of dishes. It's just chopsticks and plates, and I'm assuming he's not getting good sleep. And yeah, he's a slob. Man, I could go over some ramen right now. Sorry, that sounds really good.
Okay, so at this point we're at another one of those Portrait of an Otaku segments. This time the subject is Mamiya Kenji. Keep in mind all these names are phony. We're protecting the identity of these folks, so they all have like digital mosaic patterns on their faces, and their names and voices have been altered. Born 1969, he is an English teacher at a girls' school, and for 5 years he has been an otaku. This fella's doing something a little different.
I thought this was a little odd that they specified his occupation. He's like, "Oh yeah. He's a teacher in an all-girls school. He's a fucking nerd." I'm like, okay.
Well, it's like, does it really matter what kind of school he's teaching English at?
I actually
apparently so.
I went to a show just a couple of days ago in Maryland, and a friend of a friend, one of my buddy's friends from elementary school. One of his favorite bands is a hardcore band, and he is pretty much a Head Start college teacher. Like he's a chemistry I think he's a chemistry teacher. Yeah. So I'm like, this guy is a teacher teaching young like go-getter minds, but on the weekends, man, he's on the back end of the pit watching bands.
Well, I mean, you never can tell. I mean, one of the most hardcore of hardcore insane wrestlers was Spike Dudley, and I think he was like a grade school teacher or something. Like this motherfucker lives to dive through tables with barbed wire and fire on them. He very casually just threw it out there in an interview that's like, "What's your day job?" He's like, "Oh, I'm a teacher." It's like, "Oh, okay."
There's a British comedian he's been on the Graham Norton show a few times, and I've caught some of his stories, but he's pretty funny. He was like a middle school teacher, and he started teaching when he was like 21, and he has drunken stories from when he was a teacher. They're pretty funny. But it kind of sheds light on, your teachers, maybe not my teachers. I grew up in kind of a little bit of the Bible Belt. But your teachers might be doing crazier shit on the weekends than you think, guys.
Yeah, for real. So this fella is a slightly different breed of otaku. You'll notice right away that he's dressed up in like military gear, and has a very realistic looking rifle. It's intentionally made to look realistic because it's an airsoft gun. It's actually a electric motor powered pellet gun. It's an airsoft gun. I used to have a lot of these. In fact, I still do. I think somewhere in one of the closets at my parents' house. I would use them as props for the movies I'd make in like high school and stuff, because they're designed to look exactly like real weapons. Obviously, they don't function the same. But this guy's out in the woods at night, and our camera crew is interviewing him. He's smoking apparently during the middle of a match or something, because you can hear people stomping around in the background, like in the wilderness, presumably looking for him. But some of the questions the interviews ask him are things along the lines of, "Have you ever considered shooting small animals?" And yeah, he owns up to that. He has. But then they ask him, "Have you ever had the desire to hurt other people?" And very immediately he backpedals and becomes very sheepish, and he's like, "Oh no, I could never imagine doing that. Like I hate war. I would never want to hurt anybody." And then they start asking him about his hobby, about his airsoft, his military simulation habit, and he explains that the reason he likes airsoft is he likes the beauty of the gun's functionality, like the singularity of its purpose. I mean, really, as a tool, a gun does exactly one thing: it causes harm to other things. It fires a projectile. You're not going to be building a house with a gun. It does one thing. So I guess that makes sense, but he also mentions that as a person who's relatively small of stature, he admires the fact that having a ranged weapon or a gun or something puts him on the same level as everyone else, regardless of physicality. So he has a bit of a nerdy Napoleon complex going there. But yeah, the data table that follows up this interview, again, remember all the data tables here, just like phony statistics, just for shits and giggles. But it says, there is no correlation between anime and guns. And I was like, that's kind of cute. At this point, we go to the Komiketo, so like the equivalent to like a Comic-Con or something. I think it's just a local one, so not like a gigantic one. But it's Kubo and Tanaka and the rest of the crew. And the cosplay that Sato had offered up to Kubo, the Cobra outfit, he wears it. And he's a big hit. And it looks like they had a great-ass time. There's tons of like cameos in the background here of various anime characters, too numerous to mention, many of which went over my head. But then we cut away from the convention, though, and Kubo is with his college gal pal, and he's looking a little disheveled. And we're out on our coffee date again. And Kyle, do you happen to recall some of the things that she threw at him here?
Yeah, she's like, "Were you up all night again? You look tired. You look like you haven't slept." And she's like, "You're also fat as fuck, dude. Like, you were a fit little tennis player. Now you're getting all gross." Because he's staying up all night, working on all this stuff, and he's eating garbage because it's just whatever's close. Like, he's probably pounding down ramen, because they show a picture of his sink, and it's just chopsticks and empty bowls. And I'm like, "Yep, that's all just ramen."
It's funny. Up to the ceiling, yeah.
This reminded me, I don't know if I've told you this before. We had this guy who was on the ship with us. I don't want to say his name, but he was a huge video game guy, and we had a little where we could do laundry. They also had these little TVs, and you could rent video game. Like you could get video games. They had Xboxes in there already, PlayStations, and as soon as he'd get off work, he would just go to that place and play video games all night. And it was open 24 hours, so he could just sit in there and play video games. And several times I remember walking through there in the morning to get like a cup of coffee, and he was in my division, and he would be asleep in the chair. He would just sleep there in his uniform. He would probably play till like 3 or 4 in the morning and just pass out. We'd have to one of us would have to wake him up, like, "Dude, we got a muster here soon." And he would just get up, and then he would just be like falling asleep in muster, and then have to go work all day. I was like, "God damn, dude!" But yeah, that kind of reminded me of him here, because he's like kind of clonking out, and I mean, the guy in the Navy was, he had a poor physique as well, but yeah, it kind of reminded me of that.
Well, I think like that's in some ways that's like the nature of fanaticism, is it causes a person to rearrange their priorities in a way that maybe isn't the most healthy. Basically, it's like you're going all in on one area of your life while neglecting, like inevitably you have to neglect other parts of it. So yeah. At this point, Kubo is leaning very heavily into his interest in anime and like cosplay and stuff like that. And obviously he's not playing as much tennis, nor does he seem to be seeing his lady friend as much.
Well, actually, it's interesting that we're talking about this. That one of the problems nowadays, I'm sure you've heard of this. The light in LED screens actually mimics UV light. So when your eyes see this, it makes you think that it's sunlight. So your brain stays awake, and if you're just focused on this screen, it just keeps you awake. And part of the problem I think now with people playing video games all night, it's not that they necessarily want to keep playing, it's just that their brain keeps thinking that, oh, it's daytime, we're going to keep playing, it's daytime, until they eventually crash. Whereas here, that's not the issue, is that he's actually just a fanatic. Like, he's so invested in this that he's losing sleep, and yeah, other parts of his life are going on the back burner.
Well, there's like one of the best things that this movie does, and I've mentioned it before, I think, is that it plays both angles. It doesn't 100% say anime like fanaticism and like being an otaku is like a good thing or a bad thing. In this case, it's like, yeah, he's kind of fucking it up with this would-be relationship, and his health is, not the best at the moment. But at the same time, the time that he's devoting to this hobby is also time he's spending with people that he values as friends. So it's not like he's a shut-in, or he's like closing himself off from the world and just, hiding in a corner watching VHS tapes or something. No, he's going out and about with his friends, but he's also kind of doing a little too much of that. But yeah, she calls him fat. He mutters to himself about a couple of like animated movies that are going to be premiering soon, so he's like arranging his schedule. He's like verbalizing his schedule to her, like unknowingly. He's like, oh, like I gotta do this, and like that movie's coming out, so I gotta see that. And she's like, what? And I also noticed that the Space Invaders arcade cabinet that was in the cafe has been replaced with a mahjong machine. So that indicates like a passage of time of some sort. I don't know if that particular model of mahjong machine was particularly popular in Japan at the time. I think we're in 1983 at this point. But yeah, we get another one of those title cards that tells us the date. It is now October 13th, 1983. And the quote here, and I guess we're still building towards your apocalypse theory here. The quote here was, court reaches a verdict on the Lockheed Marubeni bribery scandal versus Prime Minister Tanaka. He is sentenced to 4 years in prison. So that's a pretty awful thing that happened. I'm sure the country was a little upset about that. And yeah, we get another portrait of an otaku. This time the subject is Mr. A. He was born in 1968. He is an assistant recording engineer, has been an otaku for 4 years, and this is one of the more unnerving interviews we have in the movie. This one takes place in a darkened room. And
is he milking it?
He might be. His body language suggests that he's at least diddling himself. Like, maybe not like yanking on it, but he's he's fumbling around in a certain area.
Testing it and seeing if it's working. He's like, no, this isn't quite working. Okay, here we go. Now it's working. Okay.
Yeah, he's just checking the piano keys.
He's
running his fingers over the piano keys on his jeans there. But yeah, we're in a darkened room. The only illumination is from the camera light from the interviewer, and a television that's on the floor. And he's wearing a pair of goggles, and the documentarian asks him like, "What's up with the goggles?" And you can tell that they're handcrafted. Like I think they have like electrical tape or duct tape on them. They look like they're built from scratch. And he explains that I built these goggles because they reduce the severity of like digital censoring mosaics. And if you're aware, a lot of Japanese porn has digital mosaics put over choice body parts. So he actually built a tool to counter that, I guess. And then they ask him about like his dating situation, or like his significant others, and he does not have a girlfriend. He doesn't really have any interest in sex. In fact, he throws the quote out there that the 2D world of sex is good enough for him. That's sufficient for him. So he'd rather engage in his sexual instincts, I guess, via a 2D medium. So not face to face with an actual person, but just like a projection, I guess. And it's like I said, the lighting and this guy's very casual demeanor about having just fucking straight up porn playing in the background while being interviewed is a little unnerving. Our statistics table this time around is about sex and marriage, and needless to say, the numbers don't favor otaku. So now we're in March 1984, and Nausicaa, Kaze no Tani no Nausicaa, Valley, was it Nausicaa, the Valley of the Wind or something? It's a Hayao Miyazaki. It's one of his earliest, biggest hits. This is, I guess, the release day for that movie. I almost put that movie on this list for this month, by the way, Kyle, because it was a big deal, and it's an older Miyazaki movie, so it's not, the animation isn't as pristine, but it holds a special place in a lot of people's hearts. And in fact, it got like a limited theatrical release in the States, as far as I remember. But Kubo and the gang, they're waiting in line, Star Wars style, for this movie. They're all sitting like on the sidewalk outside the theater, presumably like the night before. And a couple of adults walk by and scold them. They're like, "What the hell are you doing sitting out here? You're wasting your lives." That's a couple of drunk adults, by the way. It's like a man in a trench coat and his lady friend. And then Tsurumaki, the night owl of the otaku group, he comes around the corner and like before our characters can be confronted with the reality of like questioning their values, like there is that moment of contemplation where it's like, man, why am I sitting out here? All of a sudden one of the nerds runs around the corner and is like, I got some stuff. Like everybody drops it all of a sudden. And he got some reference sheets for Macross, which is it's probably parallel to Gundam in terms of like cultural value for anime in general. It's just gigantic sci-fi series. Most famously in the West, it was converted into a show called Robotech, which I'm sure you saw for rent at like Blockbuster at some point in your life.
Possibly.
Yeah. But yeah, we all nerd out over the reference drawings. I don't know how he got a hold of them, but like they form a circle around him and I'll look at it. And then we cut away from that, and Kubo is at his apartment trying to call his lady friend Ueno. And you want to tell us what happens there, Kyle?
Oh yeah, he calls her up in a do dancers, and he's like, "Hey, is she there or whatever?" And he's like, "Yeah, you totally can talk to her, bro." She's like, "Oh no, I didn't know you'd be calling." Yeah, she basically dumps his ass, because she needs a dude who is not a super nerd. Yeah, she ends it, and he's a little devastated, I'd say. You didn't see that coming, bro? Just a little bit?
I mean, he should have, but at the same time, remember, this guy's supposed to be, college age. So, and in fact, I've gone over this with my friends a couple of times. I feel like that's, in a lot of ways, that's the secret of anime. At least, like, popular mainstream anime, anyways. It has the way it's written, and the way the animation is stylized, and the way it's paced, is kind of perfect for touching on like the emotional nerves of a younger person. Like if you have the capacity to get swept up in things, to look at a story or something and treat it as the most important thing happening at this moment, it's a terrific medium for that. Part of the reason why I stopped watching this stuff is that I kind of lost that ability. So I kind of roll my eyes to a lot of this stuff because a lot of it's heavily based in tropes, and it's too familiar, and I just don't have that ability to buy into it anymore. And yet somehow I can still watch pro wrestling and enjoy that. Go figure. Yeah. But yeah, Kubo is kind of broken up about this, and he and Tanaka go to the equivalent to the Tokyo Google steps, as I call them. Mm-hmm. I have a tradition here in Seattle with my some of my closer friends that Google Steps is where the real talk happens. Pretty much, if we're out and about and someone has some real shit to talk about, if we end up at the Google Steps, that's where it's going to get hashed out. It just that's how it always works. But yeah, Tanaka's sitting down with Kubo, and at one point he tells him, while he's trying to console him, he tells him, "Hey, like, I don't think normal people could ever understand us," and that kind of like sets Kubo off in a way. He freaks out a little bit, and he like just kind of shouts out to the crowd, like no one in particular. He's just kind of shouting, but he demands to know why like his enjoyment and his obsession with anime and manga causes him to be ostracized from society. He thinks of it as being very unfair. That's like, I have this thing I love. Why can't I love it and have that be okay? And from there, he just keeps rolling. Like he goes on like he cuts a promo like Ric Flair, like Hulk Hogan or something, and he decides he's gonna go all in on being an otaku. He's like, that thing that I was going like 90% on, I'm going to go 110% on now. And he declares that he wants to be the best. He wants to be the best that ever was, the very best that ever was, to quote the Pokemans. He wants to become the Ota King. And Tanaka, of course, supports him. And then we get some awesome music. And then credits, I believe, that I think is the conclusion of the first part of this OVA. It's a 2-part series.
Yeah, it kind of just rolls straight into the next part with instead of having like a little cold open, I think it goes straight into the next credits. Or does it start with them making the garage kits and then our credit sequence again?
It starts and then it cuts back. So we get a taste of them building garage kits. So the first shots of the second episode take place in 1985. We are mixing some chemicals, and I really like the lighting and the framing of these shots here, where it's Tanaka and Kubo like sitting across from each other on this table, and the quote unquote camera is set like at the level of the table, so both of their figures look very imposing, and like there's an overhead light where it's almost like an interrogation room or something. So it feels very serious. Like what we're doing right now is the most important shit ever. And we're mixing chemicals, and then we're not entirely sure what they're up to. And then we get our super awesome credit sequence, our opening sequence with the awesome theme song, which you should definitely look up if you haven't heard it before. And it's revealed to us that Tanaka was building like a mold for a resin model kit. Which, as you had said, is called a garage kit. So the scheme at this point is Tanaka and Kubo have doubled down on becoming otaku, and they want to get into the anime industry, I guess, by way of building these garage kits and selling them. So they want to start a business, basically. And Tanaka's just like, he's on fire at this point. He's just rolling. He's throwing ideas out there left and right, and Kubo tries to reel him in a bit, and he's like, maybe we should do this right. Like, get an actual business license and like actually make a legit like brick and mortar business, and we'll call it Grand Prix or GP. And at this point, I forget if I mentioned earlier, but this is the actual origins for the animation company that made this OVA, Gainax. It was a merging between a garage kit production company, so a company that made model kits, and a very small animation house. They came together and they formed Gainax. So at this point, like if you're aware of the company history, you can start to see where we're going with this. And what did you think of the montage here? Because we actually get to see them like building up their business, and holy shit, a lot of stuff happens in the next couple of minutes here.
Yeah, they kind of make it seem easier than it actually is, because these guys are basically like, we're gonna take this nerd stuff and we're gonna be crazy successful with it, and they're like, oh no, it's super easy, bro. You just got to be focused. That's how easy it is. Which I could see that being more of a 90s mindset than it is now. Like, no, just you got to put your mind to it, spend all your time doing it, and you will succeed. You will succeed, no problem. And I think it's a good message to always send people. Like, but yeah, but in this case, it actually did work. Like, these guys actually became successful doing this, like, in real life, like you just said. But yeah, the montage sequence is kind of nice. There's such an '80s feel to this, like the montage, the music. I mean, I'm sure it took a while to animate and stuff, but yeah.
Well, it needs to be said. I mean, this is not the most handsome of animated films. Like, it's well animated, but not that well.
I was gonna say this is a little bit harder to have a full discussion about because this was more of a learning experience for me. I don't have as much feedback on this one, but next week or the next episode, I think there'll be quite a bit more conversation. I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of been my intention with this month's programming, was to kind of ease you into things and then get rolling, and hopefully we get to the point where you start teaching me shit as opposed to me just talking at you the whole time.
I mean, how much more anime do I have to watch?
Honestly, not that much.
I mean, just in life.
Oh, well, I mean, if you want to become a Kubo or Tanaka, a whole lot. But I mean, if you want to become the Otaking, if you want to become the very best that ever was,
that point in my life is past. I don't think that's an option for me anymore. I'm gonna regress now.
It's like, these old bones can't handle the animes anymore. But yeah, these two very clearly have never tried to start a podcast in the 21st century. Because, everything goes very smoothly for them, to the point that I almost thought this was going to be a dream sequence, because they just get rolling and everything works out. We get to see them laboring over their products and refining them and like publishing print ads. Tanaka hires Fukuhara, who is their assistant. She's hot. And she... Yeah, she kind of becomes significant later on, but I'm not entirely sure why. But her character model is kind of like a trope in like manga and anime, where she's like the ultra pure soul, where like everything about her is whimsical. It's like kind of like a manic pixie dream girl minus the manic.
Thank you. I was just about to say, she's a manic pixie dream girl.
Yeah, she is, but not manic. Just kind of overall just really perfect in a lot of ways.
She's kind of like you haven't seen Fanboys, have you? The Star Wars movie.
No, actually, you've brought it up before, where I remember you telling me about it, and maybe I should watch it, but I remember you told me, like, I think Ray Park has a cameo that I might like in there.
Yeah, it's subtle. I mean, only diehard Star Wars nerds and action movie fans would get it, or I'm sorry, action movie fans like you would get it, because you're separate from just the traditional action movie fan. My dad's an action movie fan. If I was to mention Ray Park, he's like, who the hell's that? Is that a new football player or something? I'm like, no, guy who played Darth Maul in Star Wars.
Yeah, if I remember right, the term, it escaped me for a minute, but if I remember right, Yamato Nadeshiko is the word for what Fukuhara is. It's like ideal Japanese woman, basically. Like Yamato Damashi is like Japanese spirit. That's like ideal Japanese person. Nadeshiko is like I think it's like a type of flower or something, but basically it refers to like an idealized representation of femininity in that culture.
The reason I mentioned Fanboys is because Kristen Bell plays the girl who works at the comic book store as Jared Fogler, something like that. I think is his name, the fat guy with the bug eyes, and Jay, I can't think of his last name. But yeah, they tried to ugly her up by putting like a black wig on her, and like, oh yeah, she's just a girl who works at the comic. Oh my god, she's 5 foot nothing hot Kristen Bell. Yeah, no,
never mind the fact. Never mind the fact she has perfect teeth, like immaculate complexion, like perfectly structured nose. Like, she's just kind of beautiful overall.
Yeah, just all around gorgeous. Yeah, she'd be hanging out with these fucking losers. Not gonna happen. This is a dream. I honestly thought she was fake when they first had her in there. I'm like, what the fuck is she doing with these guys? Or maybe it was like a pillow lady that they had. They're like, oh yeah, she's working on stuff, and then he would look at it and like, That's a pillow. No. She's hard at work over there. She likes cute boys and alcohol. I'm like,
Yeah.
right.
Right.
Right. You got a little polyamorous thing going on here with that pillow, or what?
So yeah, it is like we during this montage we get to see Kubo and Tanaka and Fukuhara. They do like a ribbon cutting event at like one of the major stadiums in Tokyo. So they're very successful. And we jump ahead a decent chunk of time here to 1987 and Wings of Hanamais. It's a film, so an animated film that again I almost put on the list for you to watch. This one, I don't think it's as universally loved because it is kind of slow and meandering, but I think you'd really like it, Kyle, because it's like the design work is gorgeous. It is a Gainax film, by the way, so the same studio that produced the OVA that we're watching. But it's about like a fictional country that's trying to go to space, and that's largely all it's about. There's no like big huge bad. I mean, there are like terrorists and stuff, but it's not like, defeat the big giant monster at the end and save the world. It's just kind of like we're trying to train ourselves how to go to space, and so it's about scientific discovery and personal growth.
I'm curious because I know that one of the reasons why I figured out one of the reasons why I like Aliens and 2001: A Space Odyssey was the use of negative space, and I mentioned that Stanley Kubrick is the master of negative space. If you just watch 2001, but I noticed, spoiler alert for Ghost in the Shell, it's it's fantastic. Like the use of negative space in that is awesome. I don't know how I'd feel about an anime in space. I don't know if it would have that same charm as a live action film.
That's the thing. It doesn't really take place in space. It's about getting there.
I was thinking
it's about escaping orbit. Like it's about escaping Earth's orbit, and a lot of it consists of just training montages of scientists and wannabe astronauts trying to figure this shit out.
Gotcha.
And it's really charming. It is a little boring at times, but the design work is gorgeous.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I would recommend it. I think you in particular would like it more so than most people. But
well, I've got a nice little date tonight with a Blu-ray I just got. Boris Karloff in Black Sabbath horror anthology. Got that. You sent me that link for. It was a bunch of Hammer films, I think, wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I picked that up. It was like $9.99. I'm like, all right, it looks like fun. So
fuck it, let's do it.
Got my work cut out for me tonight.
So we cut to another portrait of an otaku. This one's another hoarder. He is into model kits, and his name is Sato Hiroshi, born 1968.
This is a healthier hoarding. I'm sorry. This is a healthier hoarding.
It is.
This guy has an actual skill, and he's obsessed with it. The other guy is, I'm sure there are real people like that. You mentioned that there are people that are like that. I'm like, that's not quite as healthy as of an obsession, but this guy is actually doing stuff with his hands.
Well, the thing that was disturbing about the VHS guy was that when asked, do you even watch this stuff, he said no. Which means you're acting on a compulsion. Like you have a psychological issue where you can't not do this thing regardless of what it actually gives you. But this person, like you said, he has a skill. He's a comic magazine editor, 9 years in Otaku, and we see him over the course of the entire interview. We see him fiddling around with a resin model kit, and he's like scraping away at it with various tools and painting it. He's actually like building a model, basically, like not from scratch, but he's modifying a pre-existing model.
But he hints that he has the skills to do things from scratch. Like he could do that. Yeah.
So he is asked about the nature of being an otaku, and like he's asked to compare himself to other fanatics out there, and he actually looks down his nose at some of the others.
Those guys are fucking pussies, man. Yeah. He doesn't say that, but
he pops his collar and he's like, shit.
Those guys, they ain't doing shit. Yeah.
Yeah. He says because he actually creates something, whereas the other people that you interviewed earlier in this film, they merely consume. Like they take in things. They take what's given to them and create a collection or something. Whereas him, he's actually crafting something, and he makes a reference to the term full scratch, which is, like you said, basically building a model from scratch essentially, as opposed to just taking a mass-produced model and then just assembling it. He also mentions that plastic models are essentially about making what's given to you, whereas a garage kit, a resin kit, is about building what you want. So like building it to the specifications of your desire. Mm-hmm. And obviously he enjoys that freedom. He's turning over, it needs to be said, he's turning over a female doll basically in his hand and modifying it. So clearly he has an image in his head of what he's trying to achieve here. But there is a level of artistry that goes into what he's doing that, like you said, like makes it, I guess, somewhat more socially acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I forget what the statistics in this segment, the statistics table says it's basically like what the public's opinion is on garage kits, and if I remember right, it basically says like most people don't even know what they are. And then we jumped to 1987, and now we're at the Grand Prix, the GP head office building, and for a few minutes here, the OVA turns into like a procedural drama, because all the characters are reintroduced to us, but this time with like on-screen titles as to their position in the company, and the tone is much more dire than it was before. It's kind of silly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they're trying to figure out how they're going to mass produce these garage kits. Don't they talk about like this is where like he's going to go to China basically. He's like, we need to get a factory in China. And like we've kind of talked about, like it's kind of not a great portrayal of Chinese workers, because they're all. It's like a giant sweatshop, and was it Mao? They've all got like the hats and everything, and it's just not flattering for the Chinese community.
Yeah, the goal here is that Kubo he has not yet become the very best that ever was. He is not the Otaking yet. He has a dream. He wants to build a utopia for otaku that he'll call Otaku Land, which the image that we're shown from his imagination is essentially like Comic-Con. But basically he wants to make Disneyland for anime and manga nerds. Mm-hmm. We get to see like a conference room scene where we get to see all of the otaku group now in like full business attire in a boardroom, and again everybody has corporate titles. We get a shot panning across Sato's legs because again anime.
Yeah. Did you see Taxi Driver, Robert De Niro?
Yeah.
For some reason you said he wanted to make Disneyland for anime guys, and I'm like, that quote in the beginning, he's like, sometimes I wipe the semen off the, or he's like, sometimes I wipe blood off of the seats, sometimes it's semen or whatever. It's just, I was picturing that. How was it like cleaning Otaku Land, sweeping the streets and all that? And like,
it was everywhere.
Because they'd have like a whole like side segment for that whole, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, no, they have. See, I haven't been to Disneyland in probably 2 decades, but like what they have Toontown, and I presume they have like a Marvel corner, and maybe they have like a Halloween Town or something like for Nightmare Before Christmas. Like, yeah, they would definitely have like a hentai corner or something. Yeah. They would, but
it would be armed guards. Like, you pull your dick out, it gets shot off. All right, you guys are here. You take this energy somewhere else. You do not get it out here. Okay.
Oh my god, that would be really bad. It'd be very messy.
It's like it's all the guards from Blade. They have like full body armor and like the stuff over their faces and goggles and everything.
I'm picturing a bunch of guys like I don't know if you've seen Equilibrium. I'm picturing a bunch of those guys, or failing that, like Cyclos from Battlefield Earth.
Okay, yes, Cyclos. Yeah.
So basically, people in like long reflective trench coats with platform boots for no reason.
Yeah, I see that.
And then Forrest Whitaker, just because he'd be the guy, he'd be the doorman.
I underestimated how bad that movie was going to be.
Oh man, your friendly bartender.
So bad.
Why you are still learning how to spell your name?
Top 10 John Travolta performances, in my opinion, but that's, besides the point.
Oh, he swung for the fences.
Yeah.
I feel kind of bad for Kelly Preston. Like, it's like, oh, lady.
She made her choice. She made her decision.
She did. She let some CGI artist play with her tongue.
No, I meant she made her decision to marry John Travolta.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe that worked out. I don't know. But yeah, the plan here is that we need to expand our production. So we're gonna go to China, and like you said, the imagery here is.
Yeah.
So they're trying to build a factory in the desert. Every single Chinese citizen is identical to one another, and they're all wearing like stereotypical like communist Chinese garb, just like the green jumpsuit with a hat. And we have like an assembly line sequence where they're just like scores of people shoulder to shoulder building model kits essentially. And it needs to be said, the Chinese representative who meets with Kubo, like the manager of the factory essentially, is about a head shorter than Kubo. So yeah, the Chinese are not very well represented in this. We do get an Indiana Jones inspired sequence here when Kubo hops a plane to Beijing, which is it's cute. But yeah, it's a little. And then meanwhile though, there's like a garage kit depression of some sort in Japan. For some reason, this is topping the headlines in the newspaper. I don't know if that would ever be the case in real life.
No.
Yeah. And then we get like maybe the single most Japanese conversation in this entire OVA. And that's two people in the Grand Prix company just talking back and forth at length for several minutes about the logistics and the details of constructing soft vinyl figurines. Like, they get into the nitty-gritty of this shit, and they're so impassioned about it that it's kind of entrancing, but at the same time, if you're actually like paying attention to what they're saying, it's like, this is the most boring shit ever.
Yeah, it was too fine of detail for just a casual watcher of this movie. I'm like, what the fuck? What does this matter? But
like I said, this particular segment of the OVA like feels like a procedural, and that's a very, very popular like style of storytelling in Japan, where it's like if you put a hobby or a profession under the magnifying glass, like any job you've ever had, of course, has jargon, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you take any one of those and you put it under the magnifying glass and you blow it up and you make a concentrated effort to make that interesting, the theory is that you can, and like through just like clever scripting and passion. And so many times in Japanese storytelling, at least modern Japanese storytelling, you see that happen. Where I've told you before, like one of the, like I can't remember his name, but one of the better modern Japanese film directors out there, some of his most famous films were just procedurals. Like one of them is about tax auditing. Mm-hmm. One of them is about like funeral service. And one of them's about making ramen. And in each case, he takes this very simple thing that most people take for granted, and he blows it up and makes an entire story around it, and he makes it like absurdly fascinating and entertaining. So I took this sequence as kind of like akin to that, although this wasn't as successful as those. But yeah, now it's September 1987, and we have a mascot that we're trying to push for the Grand Prix company. This is I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce German words, but it's Marchen Doll Maki. It's basically a bunny girl.
Yeah.
Kind of hot. And then we get to see a scene of Tanaka taking a meeting with a mysterious stranger who basically sends a limousine for him, so you know they're someone of status. And we don't learn who this person is for a couple scenes. Then we get another one of those title cards. July 23rd, 1988. A Japan Self-Defense Force submarine, Nadashio, and fishing boat Daiichi Fuji collide and sink in Yokosuka Bay. 30 people die. So I guess that still builds on your apocalypse theory, where it's just a collection of bad shit that's happened. Portrait of an Otaku. This time it is Sean Hernandez. Born 1964. He is a missionary. 6 years in Otaku. And what did you think of this interview? Because this was very different from the others.
Yeah, so he's being interviewed, and there's a lot of subtitles for this, and they're talking about how, like, the American guy is saying, he's like, yeah, I came over here, and then I just fell in love with anime. It's the greatest thing I've ever seen. They have nothing like this in America. I wish that I was born in Japan because it's the coolest thing ever. And I'm like, okay. But underneath that, the actual guy is saying an eighth of what's coming on there, and he does not say most of the things that they're talking about. He basically says like 4 sentences. He's like, I like anime. I came over here and I just kind of like it. It's pretty cool. There's really cool illustrations. But they add a whole bunch of stuff on top. And he's got like a really shitty apartment, and they show like a little clip of him like coming out of a store with some stuff. And what were the stats for this one? What was their statistics?
Oh, the statistics were maybe the most bullshit of any of them. Was that basically 90% of foreigners, like pretty much everybody who lives in Japan that isn't Japanese, is familiar with anime or is here because they love anime. So it's basically like trying to push an agenda saying like anime is the cultural ambassador for Japan or something. It's all bullshit. But yeah, it was really interesting because as a native English speaker, you can hear him speaking over these subtitles, and it doesn't match up at all, really. No. And it needs to be said that this person apparently did object to his representation on camera after the fact.
I would too.
Yeah, he's made to look like a crazy, like, self-loathing nerd. like especially that last line of like, "Oh, I wish I was from Japan and I was Japanese." It's like, what? Who the fuck says that?
No, I mean, Kung Fu Elliot maybe, but not.
Oh,
no.
Well, I mean, he actually did make that claim that he was like, I forget what the ratio was, but he claimed he was part Japanese or something. Kung Fu Elliot. More people need to see that fucking movie, by the way.
They really do.
But yeah, Grand Prix completes the factory in China. We have an emergency meeting in conference room 2, and we get to see the mysterious stranger that Tanaka had the meeting with sitting at the head of the board table, like the table. He's backlit, so you know he's evil. He's also wearing glasses that reflect the light in the evil way. His name is Kanda, and basically he's there to tell Kubo that you're out. So Kubo has been ousted from the company. And
his college hottie, she's on his shoulder basically like, yeah, Kubo, you're fucking fired, bro.
I wish he had a Willem Dafoe reaction to this. It's like, out am I? Like, do you know how much I sacrificed?
He does flip a switch right there. I do. I don't remember much from Spider-Man 1, but I do remember he's just like really calm. Then he just fucking snaps. It's a good moment.
Oh, that is one of the more gifable moments from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. I've used that one many a time.
Everybody says how great that second Spider-Man movie is, but I don't remember a fucking thing from it.
I do think it is the best of them, but Willem Dafoe is so good in that first one.
I've seen that first one a lot. My brother and I, we had that thing on a lot. And yeah, Willem Dafoe is very memorable. I'm like, I don't remember that actor. Who's the actor that plays Dr. Octopus?
Alfred Molina.
Yeah.
Motorin.
Yeah, that's his best performance.
What about Indiana Jones? You throw me the idol, I throw you the whip.
He's in there for 5 seconds.
He dies good though.
Yeah, but yeah, he's just. I thought that he was an underwhelming villain. I wasn't really buying it.
The thing with him is that he doesn't really get the chance to be a villain. Because like Willem Dafoe, he is the Green fucking Goblin. He's going way over the top with being a supervillain, whereas Dr. Octopus is more sympathetic.
Willem Dafoe's kind of like a Tom Noonan, where it's just like any minute now he's gonna turn. He's gonna be. He's playing the good guy right now, but he's gonna turn. Even in Platoon, I'm like, he's gonna turn at some point, right? Like, no. Willem Dafoe's the good guy. I mean, but in fairness, I'm like, Tom Berenger's the bad guy, right? He's the bad guy.
You think?
The whole fucking time. Like, there's no getting around that.
But yeah, I do think I like Spider-Man 2 the best. But I think a lot of it has to do with just a single scene. The train, like, holy fucking shit, that is like gold standard superhero kind of shit.
Does he attack him in the coffee shop with Mary Jane?
Yes.
I think I remember liking
that was actually
scene.
the first teaser, I think, for that movie. It was
Okay.
just the coffee conversation and then a fucking car flying through the window.
I remember liking that sequence a little bit, but yeah, other than that, I might have to give it a rewatch. I haven't.
Yeah, you might want to. I mean, Sam Raimi's good times. Like,
Yeah.
it has a good energy to it.
Evil Dead is on deck right now because it's getting close to Halloween. Like, it's getting close to autumn, and yeah, the Evil Dead is on deck right now.
Very nice. I'm very excited for your programming choices for October, by the way.
My Killer October.
Yeah, Kyle's Killer October. Looking forward to it.
There might be a few tweaks here and there, but I think I've got it pretty much set.
Well, I mean, shit, Kyle, I was tweaking Anime August up until, like, the day we started. Maybe even, like, days after we started. It's like, no, fuck, we're not doing that one. We're doing this one. Sorry. It's like, but I already watched the other one. It's like, fuck! So, yeah, Kubo is transferred. So he isn't out of the company, but he has been essentially demoted, and he is transferred to the Kichijoji branch, which I think brings us to the beginning of the entire OVA, where we got to see him during the holidays stuck in a desolate office by himself, like in an absurd hour of the day. So we get another one of those title cards. January 8th, 1989, Emperor Showa dies, ushering in the Heisei era. Portrait of an Otaku. This is Akabori Osamu, born 1972, culinary student, 9 years in Otaku. And this guy was maybe the guy with the porn in the middle of the room was pretty bad. But this guy with his porno PC, this was very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So this guy is intensely preoccupied with playing I think it's a quiz game. And this is not uncommon in Japan, where you have either like some sort of arcade machine that rewards you for clearing levels or advancing in the game with nudity. So this
wait,
guy's playing.
He's doing Billy Madison, like he's doing.
Yes.
He's doing
Yes.
quizzes, and Chris Farley's pulling off his shirt. Like, he gets a reward.
That is correct.
That is correct.
Oh. Yeah, that's exactly what he's doing, but with a PC game.
Second best part. It's not the best part of that movie, but the second best part of the movie is where Chris Farley gets his dick rubbed by the penguin.
That was pretty great.
It's an overlooked part in that movie, but it's
I think
pretty
Chris
funny.
Farley has every best scene in that movie because he's Chris fucking Farley.
Yeah, he does. Him laughing, eating the lunches. Like, if he had just been eating
great.
them, that would have been one thing. But him giggling while he's eating it.
I think my favorite thing he does in that whole movie, though, and this is something only he could do. Actually, maybe Brad Dourif could pull it off. It wouldn't be funny, but it would just be scary. Is when he's driving and like some kid throws a sandwich at him.
Yeah.
And it like hits him in the back of the head and he whips the fuck around.
Yeah.
And he is just bright red. Like, hey! It's like, whoa! Like nothing that large should be able to move that fast.
That was real rage right there.
Yeah, I think he went method for a sec. Like he channeled his inner bus driver.
Oh man.
Yeah, just his face looked like it was going to explode.
Oh, it's kind of an underrated Chris Farley movie in my opinion. Almost Heroes.
Oh yeah.
I really enjoyed his his performance in there. He's very
him learning the alphabet.
That's exactly what I was thinking. He just
Do you want my head to explode?
that or the bourbon where the guy's like, you look like you fancy bourbon. He's like, oh no, I couldn't, and he just fucking shoved in the bottle.
No, it has that ugly like cheapness to it. Like if you listen to one beat of the music in that movie, it just makes you cringe. Where it's like Casio keyboard, but I do enjoy it. It's stupid, but it has some good moments in there.
I might dust it off here soon.
Yeah, that and like I think it's actually right on par with Wagons East. In fact, maybe we should do a head-to-head between Wagons East and Almost Heroes, because they're both like bad kind of like Western comedies starring overweight comedians who died like 5 minutes after it came out.
Is that a month or?
I mean, they're two large individuals. I'm sure we'd have a lot to talk about. We'll get to it, but yeah, this guy playing he's I think this guy actually is diddling himself during this interview.
Maybe this was the diddly guy.
But the interviewer is asking him questions along the lines of like, do you ever go out to admire the blue sky? And he like sheepishly replies like, oh, I don't go out much. But the thing that makes him creepy is that he is like dangerously involved in this computer game, where his focus, he can't focus on the questions he's being asked because he's so fixated on the computer. And like every question that's directed at him, he takes a few moments to respond. Sometimes he just doesn't even hear it. It creates a really unnerving atmosphere, let alone the fact that he's playing a pornographic game in front of a camera crew. But yeah, they actually ask him at one point, do you think what you're doing right now is indecent? And his response is like a very long pause followed by like, now that you mention it. But that's about all they get out of him. But they ask him, like, what do you think about real women? And his response is even more troubling, where he does this more than once, actually, where he basically says, like, oh, look how pretty Hiroko-chan is. Like, Hiroko-chan being the girl that's on the computer in front of him. Mm-hmm. So it's like clearly it's the one question he doesn't really want to talk about. But yeah, the statistics table here is about it's about otaku talking to themselves, and how it seems to be a pattern where like otaku apparently have a predisposition to talk to themselves more often than most folks. Again, more bullshit, but it's kind of cute and kind of fun. So now we're in 1991, which again was the beginning of the OVA. Grand Prix is doing very well, even in the USSR apparently. Kubo bumps into Tanaka at a sales event, and Tanaka is disheveled. He's unkempt, his hair is all fucked up, like not that it was great to begin with, but he's got like the 5 o'clock shadow thing going, his clothes are shitty, and he confesses to Kubo that the bankers kicked him out of the company too, and he's distraught, and instead of being angry with him though for getting him ousted, Kubo forgives Tanaka and says like, hey buddy, like why don't we start over again? Tanaka's like super thankful about this, because it's like his one friend in the world right now, and he forgives him. He doesn't blame him for everything that happened to both of them. And we cut to another title card. January 1st, 1991. The 23 districts of Tokyo increased phone prefixes from 3 to 4 digits. So there's a fuck ton of people in Tokyo, apparently. Go figure. Portrait of an Otaku. Murayama Akira, 1964. Unemployed, 10 years in Otaku, and 6 years as a cell thief. And
this is the anime equivalent of people hacking, like people hacking in and stealing scripts and shit like that, which was kind of popular. Didn't Harry Knowles do that shit? Didn't he get a lot of? There was some.
That may have been how he got his start. I'm not sure.
I think he might have hacked into, maybe stole the Star Wars script.
Oh,
I can't remember. I remember somebody mentioning it briefly. I'm like, who the fuck is Harry Knowles? And like, y'all know who the fuck Harry Knowles is? I'm like, should I? And they're like, yeah, I think he stole a script for something. It might not have been as big as Star Wars, but yeah, leaking scripts was kind of a thing in the 90s when the internet was getting big. But
it's still a thing. I mean, the Sony hack actually we're still in the fallout of in some ways.
Oh no, they stole the script for a superhero movie. What could we possibly do? What kind of twists and turns? Who gives a fuck? My God.
Yeah, I mean the superhero genre of storytelling like exists to perpetuate itself. Like
Yeah.
it's like wrestling. The Undertaker is defeated but never dead, never
There,
gone.
there are no surprises. I'm not going to be shocked by anything that happens in a superhero movie, except for when Kurt Russell tells Star Lord that he gave his mom cancer nonchalantly. By the
Yeah,
way,
just on a whim.
he
Like,
shoulder shrugs it. He's
yeah,
like,
he's just like,
"Hey, I kind of gave her
I mean,
cancer."
what are you gonna do? Like,
Damn, dude. Like, I'll give him that. I'll give them that. That was a nice little twist there.
yeah,
But yeah, we're are we back to the real person? Yeah, this guy is a dude that goes into studios basically when they're super busy, probably at the end of Q3, and tries to find. He goes in and just kind of snags illustrations and maybe some storyboard stuff. I'm not really at this point. It's not storyboard stuff. He steals illustrations.
yeah. He does have a little bit of a code of honor going. He does say that he never steals cells that have yet to be shot. So basically, a drawing that hasn't been animated yet. So basically, he says that I don't want to interfere in the actual production of the animation, but I'm still gonna steal shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, he apparently makes decent money doing this because it's a supply and demand kind of situation. There's a lot of people out there who want the things that he can get them. And then the statistics table here is about Otaku and how many of them would take an animation cell for their favorite anime if it was offered to them, and 100% of them say yes, they would. New plan. Tanaka and Kubo want to make a fucking movie on Tanaka's 8mm camera. Like before, Tanaka is on fire. Kubo is trying to reel him in again, like before. In fact, this whole sequence is, again, quote unquote, shot to look pretty much the same way they came up with their plan for making Grand Prix, the garage kit company. So this is basically just two guys sitting down and pounding out a plan. And then scratch that.
These guys are coming up with a plan.
Up with a plan. So Tanaka invites Fukuhara to help them. And it turns out she brought a sexy new drawing for a sexy new mascot.
Misty May.
Yeah, super idol Misty May, bunny girl. I posted a picture of her on the Instagram because, I'm trying to promote the damn show, and I figured sexy bunny girl would be a good way to do that.
No, that's a trap. If you see that on any other site, you're like, oh, I'm not clicking on that. No, that'll crash my fucking computer.
So Tanaka actually rambles a bit here, and he says that that other mascot we had, that March and Maki or whatever, the reason why she didn't work out as well is because the thing that the kids are really into nowadays is mascots, like mascot animals. It's like you look at any of these mascot chicks, they got to have a cute animal friend with them. And I mean, if you look at any Disney movie, yeah. That's how it's done. That's how business is done. That's how winning is done. But yeah, they give Misty May Posy and Nega King, basically two little lion cubs, one dark and one light, with little wings, and they're very cute and adorable. And the new company is going to be called Giant X, GX, and they're going to become an animation house. And we get another super high energy montage here. This one was maybe even more fun.
Yeah.
We get to see them drawing and painting animation cells and then shooting them. And needs to be said, the detail put into the actual machinery they're using to shoot the animation cells looks very genuine. Again, I mean, it's a fucking animation. I'm sure they have the tools right in the back room that they can just look at as reference.
Yeah.
And then we get to see the reprise of the Gainax bounce. I think we went over that before. It's a staple of the Gainax animation house, applied to Misty May.
Well, we'll get some bounce. We'll get some bounce. I noticed in our next episode. Not bounce. I'm sorry. That's a little bit. I'm sorry. I
realistic physics.
Realistic physics. Yes. Thank you.
Very realistic physics. And then there's a cool shot in here of them in a back office with racks and racks and racks of VCRs, producing VHS tapes for their animation, which I'm sure maybe could have been the beginning of the actual Gainax or many a small animation house. It's a very charming image of entrepreneurs. It's like Ghostbusters minus the ghost fellatio or whatever. But they hit it big. Giant X Studio. And we get to see the montage continues. There's a really cool shot in here where we get to see Kubo like huddled up behind a camera person, like with a professional camera rig on a crane, and they're shooting a model city exploding. So they're making like a live action special effects film, a tokusatsu film. And Misty May is rented out, and then we get to do like a screening, like some sort of crazy IMAX screening at like the Tokyo Dome of some sort of space bullshit movie. It looks akin to Star Wars, but basically the point is they hit it big.
Yeah.
And then we jump way ahead in time, and it's now 1997, and we get just a brief glimpse as to what's going on in other parts of the company. As it turns out, Ueno, Kubo's like college crush, she leaves Kanda, the person who ousted him, and we get to see him like crumpled on the floor of like the boardroom, looking crestfallen, and she has a little girl with her. So apparently they popped out a kid at some point. But point is, Kubo not only won, he destroyed his antagonist, I guess, who was never really much of an antagonist. But
It's not enough that I should succeed. Others should fail.
there you go. America. And then we jump ahead again to 1999, and now we're in like we're in the end game now, essentially. Not quite, but Otaku Land in Tokyo opens, and there are a ton of references here. Again, too numerous to count. Tons of anime characters, tons of cosplayers and stuff. There's a giant mech in the center of Otaku Land that makes me think of the Gunbuster, which is again a Gainax production. I think it came out a few years after this though, so it's probably not entirely based off of it. And then Kubo runs out onto this platform, like surveying the crowd, and he declares himself the Ota King. So now he is finally the very best that ever was. And we get another title card, and I believe the last of the portrait of an otaku. The title card reads, September 13th, 1999, nuclear waste explosion on the moon. And it needs to be said, this film came out in 1991, so 1999, this title card is obviously bullshit.
Yeah.
And I don't know of any nuclear waste explosions that happened on the moon in 1999. And our last portrait of an otaku, Uesaka Hidehiko, part of the film crew. So it turns out that there was a secret otaku embedded with the documentary crew. Somehow they find him out. So this sequence is shot like hidden camera style, and we get like on-screen text telling, like putting us in context here, where we start out on the inside of a van, and we're driving alongside this crew member, and he's coming out of a like a cell smuggler meeting, they call it. So they're driving alongside him, and they're conspicuous as all hell. Like they're loud. They're in a big van with lights and blaring, like shooting out all the windows, and they run up on him, and he wants nothing to do with them. In fact, like he gets a little bit physical with them when they start trying to like question, like, what's in the bag? What's in the bag? As you know, most people would do if they got approached by a camera crew on the street. And then we cut to 2035, and we're actually like in the end game proper. And you want to walk us through this closing scene here, Kyle?
Yeah. So the world is a lot of the world is underwater at this point. We have our I forgot his name. Kubo, sorry. Kubo and
Tanaka.
That's what I said. They have aged quite a bit, and they are walking underwater, and they're headed towards Otaku Land. And they're kind of just chatting like, yeah, this was awesome. This was a great thing that we built. And then out comes, they're like going towards the entrance, and out comes Homegirl, their friend. And she's super young, like she's very youthful, and she's like, "Come on in, guys, we've been waiting for you." And they get into Otaku Land, and everybody goes young again, like they're all how they were at the beginning of the film. And they're in some kind of is it Gundam? Is that
Mm,
the really it's not that, but it's
yeah,
something along. It felt like something along those lines, or like a transformer.
it's a giant mech, giant robot.
Yeah, um, yeah, and they get in and they blast off to space.
Yeah,
And
they take off their helmets, which it needs to be said their diving gear are are actually cosplay, so they're not wearing like diving suits. They're wearing like the one guy's wearing something from Gundam, I know for sure, and then the other one I couldn't actually recognize what spacesuit it was, but the one was definitely from Gundam. But when they take off their helmets, their youth is restored. So I don't know if this is supposed to be some sort of trippy dream sequence or something. Um, but yeah, the mech transforms into a space shuttle. The top of it, the nose cone, turns into a drill. Reminded me of the Gotengo, I think, from the movie Atragon. It's from Toho Studios, the same studio that makes all the Godzilla movies. They made a movie about it's like an undersea empire versus a flying submarine. It's pretty fucking badass. But yeah, they take to the stars, and then we get a final title card like saying May 15th, 2035, the launch of the 5th generation spaceship Eltrium. And then credits. And yeah, that is Otaku no Video, part 1 and 2, which I believe the title for the second episode is just more Otaku no Video 1985.
yeah,
Yeah, this is cute. But yeah, Kyle, what'd you think of this?
that was informative. If I was gonna get into anime, if I had no experience whatsoever, this would be a good jumping off point. From the other stuff that I've seen that you've had me watch, this isn't great. The story's very unconventional from what I've been exposed to so far.
Very.
Yeah. But yeah, it was informative. If you already if you're already into anime, I don't see a need for this movie at all, really. Maybe if you are familiar with this studio, or if you're a fan of this studio, you might find this interesting. But yeah, other than that, if you're wanting to get into anime, this would be a good jumping off point.
Yeah, that was my intention in having it be the start to Anime August, is because you don't have the most extensive background in the medium, and I felt like this would give you like some insight into like the cultural context, like what this stuff means to the people who make it, kind of. A couple of notes here that definitely need to be said. So this came out in 1991, and there was the timing of the release of this was kind of important. I feel like there was an inciting incident that kind of got the ball rolling on this production. So there was a serial killer in Japan. I can't remember exactly when he was apprehended, but I think everything started in like 1988, which would make sense with the timeline for this anime. But his name was Tsutomu Miyazaki, and I'm sure there are dozens of true crime podcasts out there that have probably covered this guy, so go ahead and look those up if you're interested. But he murdered like 4 girls, and he practiced like necrophilia, cannibalism, and vampirism. He did some awful things, and the big thing about his situation though was that when he was apprehended, the media portrayal of him as a person really played up the fact that he was obsessed with anime. So he was an otaku, and the VHS collector that we saw in Otaku no Video, that was basically his living situation. So the media really played that up, and at the time it kind of created like a really anti-anime sentiment among the general public. So like public perception of otaku and people who were interested in anime was at maybe an all-time low. Like it's never been a mainstream thing. It never ever will be, probably. It's to this day still kind of a fringe thing, because fanaticism is that. Like, that's the nature of it. But at the time this particular animation was produced was a time when people were asking a lot of questions as to like the character of the people who are into these kinds of things. Like, is this dangerous? Like, should I keep my kids from being exposed to this?
I think
so. I think it was important that this was made when it was, probably.
I would parallel that with Marilyn Manson in the United States. Very, very, very outspoken anti-Christian message in his music, especially in the 90s. And then when Columbine happened, those kids were referenced to being Marilyn Manson fans, and he was under a lot of scrutiny after that. And actually, Michael Moore, I think he was Michael Moore interviewed him for Bowling for Columbine, and actually talked about him. So they're like, "Oh,
Yeah,
it's Marilyn Manson's causing all these problems." He's like, "No, that's not the problem." And he's very intelligent too, and he sends it right back. But I guess there probably wasn't a platform like that in Japan at the time, especially for this medium.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, I hadn't thought of that. But you're right. That pretty much exactly parallels that. And yeah, another note is that, like I said at some point during the episode, Gainax started out as two different companies: General Products, which produced garage kits, and then Daikon, which, curiously enough, was a small animation house that created opening animation cinematics for a convention of the same name. So they made Daikon made videos for Daikon, which, by the way, you really ought to look those videos up. They made two of them. I think they're no more than 7 minutes long, but they're just these really lovely little animations that are made by really big nerds who love the things they love, and that's kind of the company philosophy at Gainax, as far as I understand. They're not so much about like reinventing the wheel or like pushing the barriers of storytelling. It's more just like, we like this shit. It's like, we love this shit. But yeah, thanks so much for catching up on Otaku no Video. Next week we're going to be jumping into Ghost in the Shell, Mamoru Oshii's classic from 1995. It's one of the titans of the medium. Not a personal favorite of mine, but for educational value, I thought that Kyle would get a lot out of it, which is why we're doing it. So on that note, again, thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next week.
Yeah.